Have we any, no, have we any apologies, Carl?
Chairman, if I confirm there are 14 members present, we have apologies from Councillor Dick, Councillor McComb and Councillor Ted Thompson. Not present at the start of the meeting is Councillor Blake. And there is one vacancy remaining on the committee.
Okay, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Alistair?
Thanks very much, sir. There's one that I don't think it's a declaration of interest, but as always, Chairman, I would wish to take governance advice, and that's in relation to items 7 and 8. Page 85, sir, paragraph 2.2, strategic housing services, supporting this development, pointing out the proposal was agreed with the Housing Subcommittee through the Strategic Investment Plan. I'm a member of that subcommittee, sir, and while I can't remember specifically, I have no doubt that as a member of that subcommittee, I was there when, in fact, that plan was approved and this project was flagged up in it. My view is that does not preclude me, as it were, from considering this planning application, these two planning applications today, Chairman, but I would like governance comment and advice on it with your leave, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd confirm that the analysis by the member is correct. What we have is throughout committees of the council, there are decisions that the council can make in respect of policy, in respect of funding. However, it is very clear that there's no presumption that that will then follow through into approval or not for planning. So the two are very distinct, and every planning application is taken at a committee of the council by the members present on its own merit. So on that basis, your decision, but my advice would be, I think every member would end up, we wouldn't have a planning applications committee if we tried to do it otherwise.
Yeah, on that basis, sir, I will stay again with your leave and participate in the determination of these two applications. I'm grateful, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Dempster?
The circumstances apply to me as well, Chairman. I'm a member of the Housing Subcommittee as well.
Okay, that's noted. Any other declarations of interest? No? No? Okay. Clerk, could you outline the procedure?
Thank you. The first procedure I would like to outline is in respect of recording of meetings. I can and I have now been given assurances that the recording system has now gone through its testing process and has now been proven that we can record meetings of committees of the. Therefore, in accordance with the protocol, it would be for this committee to determine whether or not it would wish to have its meeting recorded. And if that is the case, then there is a statement that I'm required to read out. I can also confirm that all the representatives have been advised that should your decision be to record, that there would be then a recording, and none of them have given an objection or asked that the recording be stopped when they give their representation. So I think it's firstly for yourselves to confirm and affirm that you would like your meeting recorded, and I would then give the statement about recording and the accessibility of the record.
Members, any objection to it being recorded? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I would then like to confirm and remind everybody present that this meeting will be recorded, and that recording will be subsequently made available for public listening. I'd also like to confirm then the procedures. I know, Chairman, you haven't taken the minute of the meeting. You'd like me to take the procedures first? Okay. So I'm very sad. Okay, I'm not on the list. If I can now address myself both to members of the committee, to the people who are present in the hall and those who are also present outside the hall. The Planning Applications Committee today will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. There is a procedural change and a removal of one of the items on the agenda, which after I've confirmed this, we'll be asking the legal advisor to the committee just to make a short statement in respect of the reasons for the withdrawal of that particular report. What will happen is the case officer or area planning manager or other appointed officer will make a first initial short statement addressing the determining issues, and in making that statement that will be accompanied by digital images. At that point in time, any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported, and as the clerk for this meeting, I'll be required to ensure that that is recorded in the minute of this meeting, as that information may be taken into account by members when you're coming to determine the planning application. At that point in time, members may ask questions of officers, but that's on points of clarification. At that point, members are not in debate because we haven't heard representation. For those applications which are in accordance with council policy subject to public speaking, then the order of the eligible parties being heard will be as follows. Third parties objecting, third parties supporting, statutory consultees, any elected member of the council who's not a member of this committee who's registered to speak, and then applicants or their agents. And that order is a little bit about natural justice. The chairman will individually invite those who've requested in advance to speak of the application to come forward and ask them to come to the table that's there on my left. They're asked to sit in the reserve seat. There's a little button to press, so don't worry if there's any problems with pressing the button. We've got able assistants who will be able to help you with the sound system. Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry if I now speak better into the mic. Does that help? That's fine. Thank you. I'd also ask then if, and that's always a good start, if there is any mic indiscipline, if people just raise their hands, I'll keep an eye on it, and then we'll just remind everybody to speak clearly into the microphone. I usually am told I've got a bit of a microphone voice, which is very loud, so I tend trying to sit back so I don't blast people's ears out. Okay, so what I've just gone through is the order in which people are speaking to the application. The chairman will then invite, you'll be asked to sit in the reserved seat and make your presentation. The first point, we just ask you to put your name, confirm your name, so that can be then put into the record. After the presentation, members may ask questions, and then at the end of that point in time, once all representations have been heard and the meeting is in formal session, then no further representations will be heard by committee. At that point, then, the Planning Applications Committee will proceed to determine the application. There are certain applications which don't fall delegated to this committee, and there are certain major developments which are significantly contrary to the development plan or a national development. Any such application, we'll be noting that at the beginning of the application, and that will then be a referral by this committee to full council. The decision notice will be issued after a period of 48 hours has passed. I'd also confirm that the chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives. We do have one change where one of the individuals who have registered has indicated they don't wish to speak, but the chairman will just confirm that when we come to that particular application. We'd ask all representatives now to remember that the time allotted, which is 3 minutes for some applications, 5 minutes for major applications, please make your representations on the basis of valid planning matters only. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the council when deciding on a planning application. So please, I'd advise everybody to use your time allotted wisely, to address material and determining issues. Don't necessarily repeat what's in the report. I think this is your opportunity to put the key points over that you wish to bring to the attention of members. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, excepting for the national major developments, which will be allowed 5 minutes. This should allow sufficient time for everybody to make their relevant points. And what you'll find is the chairman will be keeping a record of the time, and just about 30 seconds before the end, we'll just give you a reminder that you've got 30 seconds to go, which gives you a time to give you a quick summary. Thank you, Chairman. If I could now ask procedurally for the legal advisor now just to confirm the position of item 5.
Item 5, 2 applications at Wallace Hall. This item will not be considered today as we have discovered that there's been a defect in the notification to objectors and they were not all afforded an appropriate chance to speak. In order to allow officers to rectify that, this application will be considered at the next meeting of this committee.
Thank you. So if I can just confirm for everybody who's present, anybody who's here just for item 5, which is Wallace Hall Academy, I confirm that that application will not be considered today, and it will be considered at the next meeting of this committee. So our apologies, but when there is a procedural flaw, we cannot allow the matter to be continued.
Thank you, Carol. Right, item 3 on the agenda, minutes of the meeting of the 26th of September. Is it Mrs. Maitland?
Chairman, just for the record, where I declared an interest, it was because my husband is related to the applicant, not to the representative, and I think that's probably relevant.
Thank you. We can amend accordingly if members are happy, but we do use the term representatives for both applicant, objectors and others. So it's a generic term, but for position we'll put in for applicant.
Any other comments on the minutes? Thank you. Reid, thank you. Item 4 on the agenda, Minnygap, Annandale Estates, St Anne's, Lockerbie, planning application for erection of 10 wind turbines and associated infrastructure, including the upgrading of existing roads, construction of internal access tracks and vehicular access from public road, erection of 1 permanent meteorological mast and 4 temporary masts. I'll miss out the meteor. Teeth are not just glued in this morning. Substation and control building and extraction of rock from 2 borrow pits. Revised proposal to that refused under 05/P/40349 09/P/3/0340. Ms. Duff.
Thanks, Chair. Before I run through some of the photos of the site and plans of the site, I will just first of all just go through some of the background to the application. Planning history to the application is quite relevant in this case. A planning application was first submitted in 2005 for the erection of 15 wind turbines of a height of 125 metres. The scheme was designed on a standalone basis, with the layout having little regard to the layout of the adjoining Hairstains wind farm. The exception to this was the height of the turbines, which matched the height of the Hairstains turbines on the basis of advice from the Council and from SNH. At this time, Hairstains was the subject of a Section 36 application to the Scottish Government for the erection of 71 turbines. It was approved in 2007, shortly before the determination of the application at Minnygap. The application for 15 turbines at Minnygap was refused by the Council in November 2007 on the grounds set out in paragraph 1.12 of the committee report, which is before you today. The first reason related to the landscape and visual impact in combination with Hairstains. The second reason was due to the impact that the turbines would have on views across Hill's designed landscape. The applicants initiated the appeal process, but at a pre-inquiry meeting, a revised proposal, which is now as proposed, was set out, and this led to the withdrawal of the appeal and the submission of the current planning application. The current proposal is designed to address the reasons for refusal set out in paragraph 1.15 of the current committee report. This is based on advice from planning officers and SNH. Unlike the previous planning application, it has been possible to obtain a consultation response from the Council Landscape Architect. As noted in paragraph 2.4 of the report, an objection has been made on landscape and visual impact grounds. However, the report within paragraph 4.28 explains why it is considered that the landscape and visual impact should not be a reason for refusal. The main reason for this is that the applicant has sufficiently addressed the original reasons for refusal of the application in 2005 by removing the turbines, which introduced additional visibility into the Upland Glen and Middledale landscapes within the regional scenic area, and also by increasing the separation from Hill's design landscape. The application is, however, recommended for refusal on the grounds of the impact that the turbines would have on the Estill Muir seismological recording station. This is a new issue since the submission of the current application. The turbines would generate seismic noise, which is in excess of the budget set by the MOD. I'll just move on now to some images of the site and some plans. The application site, which is depicted by the red line, is located just to the east of the A Forest on moorland ground, is within the foothills landscape character type. The dotted lines show the location of two access options. You see one running to the left-hand side of the picture there, which is the access that the applicants have confirmed is what they intend to use should the application be approved. This uses existing forest track. This plan shows the layout of the turbines and also the access and other infrastructure works. The purple line shows the, again, access option A to the left, and the green line is the access option B, which has been ruled out now. This would have required quite a lot of new track construction. This shows the turbine elevation, which is 125 metres to tip height. This plan, which is within the environmental statement, shows the Minnygap turbines in relation to other wind farms which are either existing, under construction, or at application stage. And this was based on the situation at the time the application was submitted in 2009. The application is assessed, the landscape and visual assessment is based on 3 development scenarios. The first scenario is development scenario 1, which was in relation to how Minnygap would look in relation to existing wind farms. However, this situation is not realistic now since the construction of Clyde Wind Farm and the commencement of the construction of Hairstains Wind Farm. More realistic is development scenario 2, which shows Minnygap in relation to Hairstains Wind Farm and also Clyde. And development scenario 3, which shows wind farms which are at application stage at the time of the application. Moving on to the viewpoints now. This is viewpoint 1, which is from Dunwoody Green, which is close to the A74 motorway. This is taken roughly 10 kilometres to the southeast of the site, and the view here would mean that Minnygap turbines would be set in front of the Hairstains turbines. Viewpoint 3 from Moffat. This is mentioned in the Scottish Natural Heritage consultation response. The trees here do screen views to the site, but it's really just in this presentation due to as I say, what SNH have said in the response. Viewpoint 5, this is from the Devil's Beef Tub. The views again are quite distant here, about 15 kilometres to the north of the site. And from Lochmaben Castle Jetty, again it's about 15 kilometres this time to the south of the site. And from the Southern Upland Way near Moffat. Southern Upland Way near Beeches. This is from the A701 near Kinnelknock. It's about 4 kilometres to Hartfell. This is roughly 11.5 kilometres to the northeast of the site. And Queensbury, the turbines would be in the Hairstains turbines would be in the foreground here with the Minnygap turbines. And from Hightown, which is within the Torthorald Ridge, in the scenic area. This is roughly 12 kilometres to the south of the site. about 11.3 kilometres to the east. And this is from the A701, which is a view over the hills, design landscape. This is the former Galloway fair access. And this is from a lay-by on the A701, showing that the views are quite well screened at this location by the presence of trees. And that concludes my presentation.
Any questions? Councillor McKee?
Thanks for all the pictures, Barry. That was interesting. But what it didn't show us was where the turbines were in relation. If we could see the turbines from all those sites, that must cause us concern. Well, it certainly caused me concern. Maybe the one from Moffat where the trees were, that may reduce the visibility. But the rest of the photographs, it seemed quite open. So could you let us give us an idea just how you see how it fitting in? It's all right saying that 11 odd kilometres away, but if they're visible for that distance, and given what you've shown us regarding other sites, there could be quite a conglomeration of wind turbines.
What I should have maybe explained as well, but is set out within the environmental statement, is that most of these views show Minnygap in front of Hairstains, so it would actually be really hard to distinguish Minnygap from Hairstains. Some of the views, like the one from Moffat, Minnygap would extend the visibility of Hairstains, so it would be like an extension to Hairstains. And some of the views do that, but many of them show Minnygap within the same view as Hairstains, so it wouldn't actually add to the visibility.
Councillor Geddes?
Thanks, sir. I'm not entirely sure whether or not this question might be more appropriately asked later in the process. Again, I would seek your guidance on that. It's 2.6 in relation to the Ministry of Defence's objection. I must admit, sir, that reading the latter part of that paragraph, I have difficulty in comprehending what really is meant here. Reading it at face value, saying in fact that the MOD have allocated a noise budget based on findings of research for the 50-kilometre radius surrounding the array. The budget has been set at a specific figure, and at present the noise budget has been reached, and hence the objection to the application. In other words, this is purely because the noise budget has been reached. Now, what precisely does that mean? On the basis that I've never regarded ignorance as any disgrace, sir, I have no compunction in asking.
This is probably something I can get involved at this stage because it was something which cropped up in my time as area planning manager across in Lockerbie. What exists up at Estill is the seismological recording station, which not only records earth tremors around the world, but is also part of the UK's contribution to looking at nuclear defence proliferation treaty. And it is very, very sensitive up there. And when we had an application for Craig Wind Farm, that was where it first became an issue. That the MOD actually objected on the day of the committee and said this was an international issue and basically had to be refused. Thereafter, for the next few years, there was a major amount of examination of this issue, both with the MOD and with the British Wind Energy funding a gentleman called Professor Stiles at Keele University to look into this issue. It's very scientific, but basically his conclusions were that the amount of frequency generation from the turbines was on the same frequency that the underground seismic arrays were monitoring, and that you could take only so much vibration within a proximity of, well, certainly 10 kilometres is definitely not on, and they have a 50-kilometre zone where it could create an influence. And the noise budget was there, a level of turbine noise that could be accommodated. Beyond that, it was going to make the seismological arrays non-functional, and they couldn't do the job that they were there for, and the UK was committed to in terms of the UK contribution to the Test Ban Treaty. So that is something which has basically impeded any development of turbines in the Annandale, Nestdale and into the Scottish borders and even the Nithsdale area to a large degree. The timing was critical, that the applications which were in the pipeline at that time, it was around about 2005 from memory, Professor Stiles did his study, were factored in. Anything which has come in subsequent to that has had to be given its place in the pecking order. Now what happened was, obviously there was the 2005 application for Minnygap. When that appeal was withdrawn, they went back to square one, they went back to the bottom of the table. So effectively, why this application has taken so long, it's a 2009 application, is to allow the applicant to try and negotiate with the MOD and see if there was a way around this. For example, simple things such as putting insulation around the base of the turbines might have been sufficient to resolve it. I've even heard of talk about pendulums within the turbine themselves might change the oscillation in the frequency. That has never been resolved. The MOD have not withdrawn their objection. So ultimately, that's why it is here before the committee today, that the applicants have said, well, we need to get a decision on this one way or the other. We tried again fairly recently to see if that could be resolved. It couldn't be. The MOD weren't prepared to withdraw their objection. So it's on those grounds that it's here before you today.
I'm grateful, sir, to Mr. Sutty for his explanation, his fulsome explanation. You know, the issue that was confusing me was the use of the word budget. I should have made that clear at the time.
It's the terminology which they've used. It's the amount of turbines noise. It's the cumulative amount of turbine noise they have called the budget. That's what they've called it.
I think for most of us in this chamber, sir, the budget, you know, has different connotations. Thank you.
It means money. Councillor Hislop.
It was with reference to, I think it was viewpoint 16, the High Town viewpoint, which is in the Tortoral Scenic Ridge. Looking at that, where would the turbines be reasonably? And is it actually that they would stand out from hairstains in a significant manner in that visual site there?
Hard to describe in the photograph exactly where they would be, but the Minnygap turbines would extend slightly beyond the line of turbines which is created by the state's turbines.
If you take Queensbury as your reference point, would they be slightly, if you look at that patch after, would they be after that?
Hairstains would actually, turbines would sit to the front of Queensbury, and Minnygap would be to the right hand side of that's the best way I can describe it.
Okay, I think some of the people in the audience are having difficulty hearing, so if we could speak into the mics. No, you can't speak at this point, sir. Sorry. You can't speak. Councillor McKee.
Following on for Councillor Geddes here, how are you trying to tell me that this proposal here is within 50 kilometres, but Hairstains is out with that 50 kilometres? Why has Hairstains got permission and MOD, and, well, obviously the MOD would be consulted. How have they accepted that, but they can't accept these additional 10?
Mr. Sutty.
They're all together.
Indeed, that's absolutely right. As I was saying, it was all to do with the timing of it, which one came in first, and then the noise budget that was the limit for the threshold that had been reached. The Hairstains application was to the Scottish Government under Section 36 of the Electricity Act, so the Council were only a consultee to that one. The Council objected to it, but it was approved after a public inquiry. That scheme was in the pipeline, if you like, and was therefore factored in by Professor Stiles. as being within the threshold that was acceptable. And the difficulty is that Minnygap then came out because the application was withdrawn, went back to the bottom of the queue, and other ones, such as Newfield or whatever, Earl's Hawk, have all come in since. So that's why the likes of Hairstains were acceptable at that time. They were factored in and were still within the tolerable threshold, according to Professor Stiles.
Any other questions at this point for the officer? No? Okay. We will move on to the representatives, and the first one I have is a Mrs. Sarah Burchell. Mrs. Burchell, please take a seat. And yeah, you have, if you could switch on your microphone, Mrs. Burchell. Yeah, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Sarah Burchell. I live at Upper Minnygap, which is adjacent to the site, and we farm there. I would like to speak to you about the landscape and visual amenity considerations of this application. This particular site consists of wide open wild land facing east over settled farmland below and backed by the A forest, where the Hairstains turbines will shortly be erected. The M74 runs through the valley below, and development on this site would be visible to all visitors going west into Dumfries and Galloway or travelling further north. Large-scale wind turbine developments at Dalswinton, Clyde and Minsker are already impacting on the valley below and on the surrounding Moffat Hills, the Thornhill Ridge, Thornhill uplands, etc., etc. With Hairstains shortly to be built, the cumulative impact of allowing the Minnygap turbines would be to give all visitors to the region the impression of a Dumfries and Galloway that is wall-to-wall turbines. Objections have been received from Visit Scotland and from the Council Landscape Architect on these matters. SNH have not objected, but their concerns regarding the impact on landscape and visual amenity run to 2.5 pages. In spite of these facts, the Planning Officer's recommendation does not include landscape and visual amenity as grounds for refusal, and I'm asking you to consider including these as grounds for refusal. Visit Scotland have objected on the grounds that the development will have an adverse impact on the Southern Upland Way. I understand it's extremely unusual for Visit Scotland to object to wind turbines on these grounds or in this area. I would have thought that this fact should add weight to the objection, but it is dismissed by the Planning Officer in 4 lines. The Scottish National Heritage response is puzzling. They don't object, but they do spend 2.5 pages damning the proposal. Indeed, I'm told that the Planning Officer has herself said she could not understand why they express such serious concerns but do not object. The points that SNH make are that the development alone would have significant impact on the local landscape, and they assess the cumulative effect of Minnygap with Hairstains as being that it will increase the impact on Moffat, which lies in the RSA and therefore requires protection under planning guidance. They also consider it will affect views over Ray Hills, which is listed as an inventory designed landscape and is therefore of national planning importance. And they advise that the combined Hairstains and Minnygap wind turbines would be disproportionately more dominant than the Hairstains turbines alone because of the proximity of the Minnygap turbines. They say the turbine's proximity will dwarf the dale below, and when looking into, over and across Ray Hills, the turbine blades will become the dominant feature of the landscape rather than the designed landscape being so. Whatever is behind SNH's decision not to object, it's obvious that they wish to highlight the proposal's unacceptable impact on the landscape and the visual amenity of the area. The Council's landscape architect identifies the site as being important because it is undeveloped ground which reduces the scale of the Hairstains turbines. It provides visual separation between the Hairstains development and the valley, and it provides a contrast with the forestry in the more complex valley landscape. She goes on to say that Minnygap turbines would have a significant impact both in themselves and cumulatively with Hairstains and with Newfield if consented, and she draws attention to the impact on Ray Hills. She mentions significant impacts on the views of Queensbury, intrusion on the skyline, the views from the RSA Thornhill Ridge. And she says the dominance of these turbines will erode the landscape character. Minnygap turbines will be more intrusive than hailstones. They will impact on the small-scale network of roads and settlements, the vale below. And because of the nature of the slope, the turbines will appear large even when far away. And in conclusion, she states that the Minnygap scheme does not comply with policy and guidance. So this evidence is from the council's
30 seconds, Mrs. Bertram.
This evidence is from the council's own expert on landscape assessment. Nevertheless, the planning officer considers that this objection should not be treated as material grounds. It appears that the main reason for refusing to take this into account is that these reasons for objection were not mentioned in previous consultations with the development, and they go counter to previous council advice.
Could you wind up, please?
I would like to remind members that a similar reasoning was used by officials when the Earlshock wind turbines were before them last year. At that point, the planning officer suggested that no objection could be made to those turbines because of a previous consultation with the Dumfries and Galloway Council had not lodged an objection.
I'm going to have to stop you, Mrs. Bertram.
In this case, the elected members went against officials' advice and objected. So I'd ask you please to refuse this application on the grounds that it's contrary to guidance and policy in its landscape and visual amenity. I'm sorry for running over, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mrs. Burchell? No? Okay, Mrs. Burchell, you can take your seat. Could be replaced by Mr. Stephen Burchell, please. Mr. Burchell, you have 5 minutes, and I will strictly adhere to that.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Stephen Burchell and I farm at Upper Minnygap, and I'm going to talk briefly about the effect of this development on the tourist industry. The tourist industry is an absolutely vital part of Dumfries and Galloway's economy. It is in the top 5 of the region's key sectors, along with agriculture, forestry and food and drink. In 2011, tourism was valued at £285 million to the local economy. It supported 5,700 full-time jobs and 1,200 part-time jobs. Large-scale wind development such as these we are dealing with here is a direct and serious threat to this sector. Now, I'm astonished that the planning officer did not pick up Visit Scotland's objection and include it in her recommendation to refuse. Needless to say, the environmental statement assesses the impact on tourism as negligible. Now, surveys of all kinds sponsored by various vested interests do tend to be flawed in parts, but I think an unbiased survey was the one that took place in the Visit Scotland survey in 2002, which makes very interesting reading and as regards any negligible claim in the environmental statement. This report was written in 2002, which may seem a long time ago, but I would suggest that attitudes to wind farms have hardened considerably since then. Turbines have become bigger and the inexorable spread is much more noticeable. It was even suggested back then that wind farm visitor centres should be set up, which seems pretty ludicrous today. The Minsker Wind Farm Visitor Centre seems quite a long way away. The survey spoke to both tourists and members of the tourist trade. Respondents from the tourist industry said that if wind farms were to be built, they should be, quote, away from areas of tourism, away from viewpoints and wildlife areas and places of natural beauty. They felt that wind farms had a negative visual impact, were intrusive and detracted from the visitor experience. There was concern that developing wind farms in important tourist areas could have a negative impact on tourism businesses in terms of a decrease in income because of fewer visitors. And that's the statement from the tourist trade. Tourism themselves said that 70% of them said walks and trails were an important element in the appeal of the Scottish countryside. 70. Visit Scotland's objection to this development specifically relates to the cumulative detrimental effect of this development on the southern upland way. 30% said wind farms detracted from the experience, the holiday experience, and 58% said wind farms spoiled the look of the Scottish countryside. When asked, would it be an added attraction to locate wind farms in tourist areas, 74% disagreed, and 25% said they would avoid or not come back to an area with wind farms. Moffat and the Moffat Hills are a hugely popular tourist destination. Hundreds of individual objections had been received to this application, and 59% of these objections came from tourists out with the area. But if we can just put surveys and environmental statements to one side and get back to the real world, into what we might call the department of the flipping obvious, let's take two scenarios. Scenario one is a landscape dominated by massive steel and concrete monsters as far as the eye can see, enormous flailing blades moving at different speeds and different angles, producing noise and shadow flicker. And now a different scenario. Fields with hedgerows, green rolling hills, larger hills and mountains in the distance, abundant bird life, peace and quiet. In other words, a typical Dumfries and Galloway rural scene. Now, which scenario is the tourist more likely to want to come back to? I would urge you to reject this application, and if you do choose to reject it, please include the considerable damage that this development will do to the region's tourist industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Birchall. Any questions for the gentleman? No? Okay, thank you, Mr. Birchall. My next speaker is Wendy Harrison. You have 5 minutes, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Wendy Harrison and live in Moffat and speak as a resident who has known and loved the area since I was a small child. I'd like to make 2 points, one general and one specific. First, as a resident in this area, I wholeheartedly endorse objections to this proposal because of the impact on landscape and likely effect on tourism. For nearly 60 years, my family has owned Dumfries, an old schoolhouse which stands on the loop road off the A701 north of Ray Hills, and so comes within the orbit of this proposed wind farm. The new Annandale Way runs past Dumfries, and we have noticed a marked increase in the number of walkers enjoying this lovely route through the region. Dumfries and Galloway have made successful efforts in recent years to boost the economy of the area by designating walks through this beautiful varied terrain, including wild moorland, and this should not be put in jeopardy by having too many wind farms with their ancillary pylons and access routes crossing the landscape. Secondly, the second point concerns access. Now, I wasn't able to hear with the resonance of the microphones about the new access route that's been designated, but I think it will relate. Although the developer's state access will be through the A Forest, I understand local knowledge suggests that Scottish Power have yet to agree to this, and that developers cannot use this route without that permission. Furthermore, I understand that surveyors from a firm named Cyberhawk, working for the developers, were on the site as recently as the 15th of August, looking at the option of using the forestry road that comes down through the Annandale estate and joins the A701 just south of Beeches. This new road would seem entirely unsuitable for extra traffic, owing to the environment it passes through and the inevitable disruption that access will cause to the farming and recreational environment. Now, I think you were also talking about a second access road which would come up past Newbank. Well, that will be using the loop road, I suppose, which, I mean, just couldn't take that traffic. So I don't know that that can be certain either. My concern is that access is not yet established and that such a fundamentally important question must be resolved before any decisions are made. Could the council question the developers on why it was necessary to explore alternatives if the developers say they already have an access route available? Overall, I'm concerned with the despoiling of the landscape will have a detrimental effect on the tourism on which a town such as Moffat is economically dependent. Also, that if the council allows this application while there is still uncertainty over access, a situation could arise, as in the case of Bearholme substation, where the developers will be able to exert pressure on further development decisions, such as access and pylon routes. So a lot hangs on this decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Harrison. Any questions? Councillor Hislop.
It's sort of clarification. My understanding from the report that was earlier on was that the proposed access is coming from the south, where the current route into Hairstains is. Now that's below the Burn Securance. If that was acceptable and the applicants have access to that road, would that nullify your complaint on that issue?
Well, I mean, if they've got access that way, yes. But I understand they probably haven't. That they haven't got permission.
It was just clarify that, and then when the applicants come, we can ask that question of them.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Thank you. Next speaker is Mr MacArthur. Mr MacArthur, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My objection to the Minnygap wind farm proposal. As a hill walker and member of the Scottish Wildland Group and for Muffet Walking Festival, I have roamed the hills around Muffet and Queensberry for over 20 years, either on my own or as a walk leader. The area is a wonderful, undeveloped land, apart from what man has created by farming and forestry, which are all aligned to nature. But this proposal for a 10-turbine wind farm at Minnygap is industrial vandalism. Visit Scotland, in the report we have here today, say that 25% of visitors will not come back to areas where there are wind farms. But nearly all the hill walkers I have met say they will not come back when we have wind farms on the hills around Muffet and its outlying ground. In other words, they're saying the wind farms will spoil their walking. From my favourite hilltop of Hartfell, all you will see across the Annandale Valley will be wind turbines. The 71 turbines of Hairstains was bad enough, but a further 10 turbines at Minnygap, closer to the valley, will have a serious detrimental effect. This is clearly an overdevelopment issue and will have an adverse impact on the natural environment and will reduce the number of walkers coming to Muffet, and Muffet depends on walkers. Again and again, we appear to have no strategy covering wind farms. The only strategy is a pursuit of targets and profit. Surely we and the landowners are the guardians of the land for future generations, and this insanity of the proliferation of wind farms will destroy it. So on these grounds, I submit to you that this planning application should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr MacArthur. Any questions for Mr MacArthur? No. Thank you very much, sir. You can take your seat. And now have Miss Olive Repton.
My name
Ms.
is...
Repton, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Olive Repton and I live at Auchencairn, Closeburn. I am a native of these parts and have spent almost all of my 80 years in Dumfries. I have been deeply concerned by the proliferation of turbines affecting our beautiful countryside for a great many years, more years than I care to think about now, probably 15 years. Personal circumstances have today largely prevented me from addressing this application before the committee in my own words. However, I have to say the following. Much weight must be attached to the MOD's objection. This is vital for protection for us all in many ways. Undoubtedly, many people will be aware of Visit Scotland's huge concerns and also the concerns of SNH. Nevertheless, other aspects are equally important. The lives of thousands have been blighted and ruined by the proliferation of turbines throughout our country, both from the visual impact and from the noise of these huge structures. As many of you probably know, I live quite near the Dulswinton ones, which were the first in the area. I would like to go back to the reporter's report on hairstains, because my husband and I attended all these meetings throughout the summer of 2006, and we were deeply concerned by the manner of the handling of the inquiries for these. Many of us made representations or intimated that we wished to make representations against these, and the first thing that came back from the reporter's office at Falkirk was that none of us would be allowed to make any criticism whatsoever of government policy. Now, this struck me as being something that was so contrary to the regulations governing a public inquiry that it was simply unbelievable. We all had to work around what we were saying so that it didn't appear that we were saying, well, this is bad. Anyway, one of my main concerns was, and I know this has been mentioned already, the impact on our landscape. Hair stains, and they all called it hair stains so that the locals on the whole, and there are plenty of them around today, they had no idea where hair stains was. They couldn't relate to this. They thought it was somewhere far away, and it had nothing to do with Dumfriesshire. Anyway, the reporter says the application site for hair stains extends over 27 square kilometres on the high ground at the edge of the southern uplands between Upper Annandale and Nithsdale, and the land lies 250 metres above the valley below. This will also relate to Minnygap. Turbines, he says, of 125 metres would therefore stand half as high again as the hills. They would appear massively out of scale with the surrounding landscape. The movement and diameter of the blades would compound their impact. Now, all this was put forward at the hairstains inquiry. But we were a bit scuppered by the knowledge that the BWEA were brought in to push this forward on, we felt, behalf of the Westminster and the Scottish governments. And the people who came had come from Southampton with little or no idea whatsoever of our natural heritage, our huge cultural heritage, or anything else in this area. So I felt that looking through the reporter's report that he himself...
You have 30 seconds, Ms. Repton.
What's quick? Right, thank you. The view of these turbines spread out over the flanks of Queensberry would greet all those using the gateway to Scotland. And the reporter actually acknowledged my own evidence concerning this impact. He says, that I am not alone in my reaction to that iconic view from Cowden, south of Lockerbie. It is an important asset to the local area.
Could you wind up now, please?
The fact that there are 6 RSAs, etc., within 16 miles of the site attests to the whole area's scenic importance. Evidence that the very beautiful scenery in which the proposal lies is highly valued by people locally, nationally and internationally. It was before the inquiry in the form of personal statements and letters of objection. The amenity of locals and visitors alike would be damaged.
I'm going to have to stop you, Miss.
I've nearly finished. I have one sentence to read. The amenity of locals and visitors alike would be damaged if the views of, towards and over the site were damaged. Many people stated in the written evidence the inquiry that this landscape is the reason why they have settled here. Thank you.
It was a good long sentence, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Repton?
Mrs.
Well, I've got you down here as Ms. So I'm not, I didn't write it. Sorry, my apologies. Mrs. Repton?
Thank you.
Any questions? No, thank you very much, Mrs. Repton. Our next speaker is Mr. Bruce Henry for the applicants. Mr. Henry, you have 5 minutes.
Good morning. I can confirm my name is Bruce Henry. I'm the Regional Technical Manager for RES in Scotland. I'd firstly like to set the scene of this application. Minnygap is a wind farm development adjacent to a large consented scheme. Minnygap was designed in close consultation with SNH and the Council Department to ensure it was acceptable in landscape terms and had a design which was sympathetic to the adjacent wind farm. I'd now briefly like to discuss planning policy. As noted in the planning report, the interim planning policy states Minnygap is not in an area requiring significant protection and is not within or in close proximity to a national scenic area or in an area of cumulative sensitivity. Minnygap is also not in an area of potential constraint. Now to further comment on landscape. As previously highlighted and discussed in the Planning Department report, due to the history, design and planning policy relating to Minnygap, SNH has no objection, Historic Scotland has no objection, and as such the planner's report has not recommended landscape and visual impact as a reason for refusal. The scheme has been carefully designed to complement the layout of the approved Hairstains wind farm to ensure this appears as a small extension and is harmonious with the original wind farm. To now comment on some other consultation responses. For the avoidance of doubt, it should be noted that Visit Scotland have not objected to this application. In their consultation, they merely make an observation that the wind farm is visible from the Southern Upland Way and then refer back to the position statement as of 2009. This position statement is probably changed now and it does not refer directly to Minnygap and its setting with Hairstains. With regard to representations from members of the public, it should also be noted that the majority of these have been derived from a pro forma. The planner's report summarises the main points of these representations, and it can be seen that all of these issues are addressed throughout the report, and none of which constitute a reason for refusal. Finally, I wish to address the only reason for refusal in the planning report, which is the MOD's objection on the basis of Estilemuir. Estilemuir is an MOD facility that measures background seismic ground vibrations. The MOD have devised, and apologies for using the word again, budget of allowable background vibrations, otherwise known as the noise budget. Minnygap has received an objection as they are out with this current noise budget due to the allocation of budget being based on the date of planning submission. Now this is there's a fundamental flaw in the allocation of this budget strategy, as there are currently undetermined projects holding on to large quantities of budget and prejudicing the progress of other projects in planning, such as Minnygap. So the budget is not full with consented projects, the budget is full with consented and unconsented projects. One of the projects which is currently holding budget is Earlshoch, which is currently sisted at appeal. Dumfries and Galloway Council and SNH have strongly objected to this development on landscape and visual impact grounds, particularly to Earlshoch's effect on the setting of the Devil's Beef Tub. Should Minnygap Wind Farm be consented, this would not breach the noise budget. The recourse of you granting consent would be that the available budget would be reallocated to Minnygap. This was the case with Langshaw Wind Farm in the Scottish Borders. You can consent this application without exceeding the MOD Estill noise budget. So to summarise, Minnygap Wind Farm has no environmental objections and would produce renewable electricity to aid the Scottish Government in reaching their demanding renewable energy targets. The only recommended reason for refusal in the planning report is on a technical issue, which, if Minnygap was consented, would be dealt with through administrative reallocation of the Estill noise budget. Therefore, I respectfully ask that you grant planning consent for the proposed Minnygap Wind Farm. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr Henry. Any questions? Councillor Dryburgh.
Aye, Mr Henry. You say that Visit Scotland do not object to this application, yet it says in our paper quite clearly that Visit Scotland do object to that, and it doesn't say anything else about them coming back to some principal thing that they say at every application. Secondly, you mentioned that there's a fundamental flaw in the policies that we have in Dumfries and Galloway. I can assure you that the policies and procedures that we deal with in Dumfries and Galloway are actually go through quite robust scrutiny and challenge when they come to committee. And you also mentioned about it's not in a scenic landscape. But is that your own personal opinion, or is that an opinion that you've been given for somebody else?
Sorry, I'll address your points in turn. The first one where I talk about the fundamental flaw, that's actually in the budget I was talking about. I wasn't referring to Dumfries and Galloway policy. The MOD have decided to allocate budget on the date of planning submission, which I suppose their reasoning at the time was probably they presumed projects would progress through the planning process and come out of the end at the same time. But unfortunately, because some projects have been delayed and others assisted, the budget is not becoming available again and projects are being allowed to sit on it. So I apologise if there was any misunderstanding there, but it's certainly not a Dumfries and Galloway policy. What was your first point, sorry?
Right.
Yeah,
Could I just maybe interrupt here? Mr Sutty, would you like to say something?
Yes, there's a lot of comments about it, whether they've formally objected or not from Visit Scotland, and I reread the report this morning and note that we have actually, in the consultation section, said that they object. I went back and double-checked what they have actually said. There was an email dated the 26th of August 2009 from the Regional Director of Visit Scotland. It says, please find attached the Visit Scotland position statement and response regarding wind farms as requested in your letter. And that's a standard document which they've always produced. They go on to say, I should also like to add that this proposed development appears to be visible from the Southern Upland Way long-distance walk, which is an important part of the tourism offering in the area. There have been a number of applications for wind farm developments along the route of the walk across Dumfries and Galloway and the Scottish Borders, and should all of these be granted, there could be a cumulative detrimental effect to walkers. So we've interpreted that as an objection, but being dispassionate about it, when you go back and look at it, they haven't actually used the word objection. So you could argue that they've expressed concerns and maybe objection that we've said in the report is too strong, but that's word for word what they've actually stated.
So in that case, Chair, obviously the applicant here has expressed an opinion of what scenic views are and things like that, so therefore we can express an opinion that we think Visit Scotland made an objection.
No. Have you got some questions to answer yet?
Yes, at the last point, I think, where you were talking about national scenic areas, that was actually out of the Dumfries and Galloway planning policy statement and is referred to in the document under page 29 of 154, relates to the IPP, and I've lifted the text from that paragraph.
Does that answer your point, Councillor Driver? Councillor Hislop?
It's getting to the access route. There was one of the objectors had asked, have you got permission to use, I think it's the Hairstains access route, and I think that's the preferred route that you were looking for. Could you address that? And on a second point that you brought up there, I don't know whether you want to answer this one or not, but would you be happy if you were sitting with assisted application and yours got moved out of the budget and somebody else got in front of you, although yours was in first?
Yeah, I'd like to address both those points. First of all, on access, we started off with two routes identified, Route A and Route B. These were our preferred routes. These are the ones that we put forward in the environmental statement, and these are the ones that we're looking for planning consent today. We decided not to use Route B, as SNH and the Council had preferred an opinion for Route A, so taking that on board, we've decided to go fully with Route A. Talking about whether we have permission to use it, that's a commercial risk for us, and shouldn't really come into the planning side of it. It's for us to go and deal with Scottish Power. Oh, sorry, and the second point, sisted application. One of the reasons why Earlshock is actually sisted is on an Estill Muir. Earlshock actually straddles the budget, so some of the turbines have budget, some of the turbines don't budget. There's a project going to committee, or is going to appeal in February, which is Newfield. They are sisting until after Newfield's been heard in order to try and figure out a way for them to move forward. So currently they are holding budget, but also have an objection from the MOD. So therefore, if that was removed, Minnygap would have sufficient budget to go ahead in full. Therefore, I hope that addresses your point with the sisted application, that they currently have an objection.
My point was, would you be happy if you had a sisted application and something else stole your place in the queue? That was the point.
It wouldn't actually change for Earlshock because they would still have an MOD objection, whether we were moved up the queue or not. They still have to come up with some form of mitigation as it stands to remove the MOD objection. Excuse me,
Does that answer your point, Councillor Hislop? Any other questions for the gentleman? No? Okay, thank you, sir. You can take your seat.
Thank you all for your time.
Right, we are in session. Dennis.
Yeah, Chair, I've got to say I'm still greatly concerned about the objection from the MOD, because this is about the compromise the capability of the UK to detect distant nuclear tests and breach agreement under the comprehensive test ban. And I don't think we can take into account anything to do with sisted or what may be in the pipeline and may not be. At the minute, we have a ban from the MOD for fairly specific reasons, and our capability in Esselmuir to carry out the business that we do. Because not only is it about nuclear tests, it's also about minor earthquakes, and it provides, as I understand it, information all over the world on a lot of seismic issues. So, Chair, I'm not prepared to go anywhere else to think about any sisted stuff or anything that might be. As far as I'm concerned, we have a recommendation here to refuse, a strong recommendation to refuse, and I'm just going to move that we actually accept that recommendation.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, I certainly support the recommendations to refuse, but I must confess, Chairman, that the comments that were made by certainly the objectors, resonate with me, and that's in relation to the impact, as it were, on the landscape, and also the impact on the economy, particularly in relation to tourism aspects of it. And I'm really not too fussed, if I can use that colloquialism, as to whether or not Visit Scotland have objected in relation to the latter. I think, that in my opinion, this would definitely be the case. And I think I would have no problems, for instance, and going to the section of the papers under specific concerns and making it clear that we lift that, for want of a better term. I would suggest, in fact, that the proposed development, it wouldn't be a case, Chairman, of appearing to be visible from the Southern Upland Way long-distance walk. Inevitably, it will be visible from the Southern Uplands Way long-distance walk, which is an important part of the tourism offering in the area. And again, I have no compunction with adopting the second sentence and pointing out that it's not, and changing from, should all of these be granted, it's not a case of there could be a cumulative detrimental impact effect to walkers and tourists, I would suggest, Chairman, that inevitably there would be such a detrimental impact. And I would suggest that, you know, we expand the grounds, as has been suggested, the grounds for refusal, by incorporating that and also the views of the landscape architect of this authority, particularly the first two bullet points. And I would, if Councillor Mail is prepared to accept what I'm saying, i.e. broaden it out, broaden these grounds out as has been suggested, I would be delighted to second them.
Just give me a second. I think Mr. Sutty wishes to say something.
The issue of the effect on tourism of wind farms has always been a really difficult issue, as I've had many discussions with Mrs. Repton on that very issue in the past. Hairstains, for example, had numerous submissions by various parties on that. The reporter effectively dismissed it in a few lines. Now, the difficulty is, Hairstains, whether we liked it as an authority or objectors liked it, it was approved, it is being implemented. The difficulty for the council here would be actually demonstrating that this development in itself would deter tourism, given the fact that you have these 10 turbines immediately adjacent to the 71 turbines that are approved. I think it would be now impossible to demonstrate at a public inquiry that this development in itself would have an adverse effect on tourism. So I would advise caution if you're going down that route. You have a clear recommendation for refusal, but on MOD grounds alone.
Wish to come back?
Yes, I do indeed, sir, with your leave. I've made it abundantly clear that at the end of the day, I have no problems in supporting the recommendation in the report. What I'm suggesting is that the comments made by certain of the objectors in relation to subsidiary grounds, Chairman, for want of a better term, certainly resonate with me. And I go back, looking at Councillor McKee, to the time that he and I moved for refusal of the Carstruch wind farm application. We did that on various stateable planning grounds, albeit it was overturned subsequently appeal. I still think, in fact, that the reporter got that one wrong, but that's no for discussion today. At the end of the day, as I say, I feel that, you know, we have a stateable case in planning grounds to adopt these two subsidiary grounds of refusal, accepting entirely that the main thrust of the decision today is, in fact, as detailed in the report, i.e. the MOD objection. Again, as I say, if that's not going to find favour with Councillor Mail, I won't push it, but I'd be interested to hear what other colleagues have got to say, sir. Thank you.
Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. If Barry is able to turn these images back to the one where it showed all the potential wind farms in a one image. I recall asking some time ago now, that one, thanks very much, Barry. I recall asking some time ago, in fact, I recall it well because we got into an argument with the planning officer about whether or no distances should be recorded in kilometres or miles. And although we have existing wind farms consented, those in application stage, we don't have the distances between them all, which would have been helpful for the debate. And I think we had an agreement in the past that would be provided. But that's by the by. I'm happy with what the debate's leading to. I just think it'd be useful if they were all included in here, because there are plenty of other references on height, mileage, length, etc. But my other point is, why is the former refusal in November 2007 reason, it's in page 24, 112, why are they not included in today's recommendation? Because the planning application is still the same. Now that,
Chair, just for clarification, that was for 15 turbines. This is for 10. They deleted the 5 turbines that were causing the most concern, so it's not the same.
I appreciate that, but fundamentally it's the same. It's close proximity to the one that's now been granted by the Scottish Government. And I just thought that there would be little difference in the grand scheme of things, because the sentiment's the same. That was the point of trying to make. But that's fine, Chair. Thank you for that.
Councillor Ferguson, Dryburgh, and then Maitland. Councillor Ferguson.
Through you, Chair, I could do with some clarification from Mr. Sutty. There's something baffling me here. Are we actually saying that we're basing the decision on the MOD's budget, for lack of better words? That's based on people potentially putting things there, or is it actually counting what's actually in right through the formal process just now? I mean, I think we need to get some reality into this. If this is the primary reason for refusal, then we should have some idea of how long some of these other planning permissions have been in place and not activated. And I can't understand why we'd have this process, without having some sort of timescale at least on people with planning applications. If we're going to turn people down because of that, and whilst I have a huge sympathy for the other part in terms of the environment and the local economy, but the primary thing here we've been asked to consider is this issue about the MOD, and I would welcome some advice from, through you, Chair, from Mr. Sutty.
If you look at the map on the screen there, basically what the MOD are looking at is any application which has a valid consent or is as yet undetermined and therefore could be approved. And looking at those, Clyde has been all but implemented. Hairstains has commenced. Dalswinton is fully implemented. Minska is fully implemented, as is Craig. Yew Hill has a permission. Solway Bank is yet to come to yourselves, and will probably do so in the next few meetings. Newfield was objected to by the council, has already been to one public inquiry, and is going to be going to a further one. Earl's Hoch has, as you've heard today, had objections to it, and it's a Section 36 application. So all of these, in theory, are either existing or could receive a permission shortly. As I understand it, when one has been granted permission but then is no longer valid, that the permission expires, the MOD will delete that from the noise budget, and that will free up potential room for other ones. But the vast majority of the ones that you see on the screen there are either implemented or in the actual planning process, and therefore could be taken forward, and therefore we have to factor them in as a possibility.
Thanks very much, Chair. On that very detailed explanation, I would actually second Councillor Mayall's movement of turn this down.
Councillor Dryburgh.
Thanks, Chair. I was kind of glad that the application site history was actually in the papers, but we do have to look at each application and put it in its own merit at the end of the day. And just looking back at the application itself, I've got to agree with everything that Councillor Geddes actually says. I think we've got to look at this particularly in Belmont. When I'm looking at the actual history one in Part 2, and that the proposed wind farm would be contrary to Dumfries and Galloway Structure Plan Policy 11 due to the significant adverse impact it would have on views across Rahill's designed landscape. And that's been mentioned today with the objectors in that as well. And I would consider putting that in the recommendations as well. I mean, I think I said once before that, and some of the objectors actually said that we don't inherit the land from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children at the end of the day, which was a Native American actual saying, and I use it quite regular in inductions at Chapel Cross. I think we've got to obviously explore alternatives as well. But I think in this particular case, I agree with the recommendations, but I think we've got to toughen them up a bit, if you like, with regard to that particular one in Policy 11.
Yeah, Chair, the Rahills issue was one of the primary reasons. If you go back, again, I'm talking about history, I'm afraid, but the previous application, when that was refused, we didn't have a landscape architect. We had a Planning, Housing, Environment Services Committee agreement to have our comments to be the same as SNH. Now, SNH objected to the effect on Rahills, specifically because of the proximity. Now, the 5 turbines that were closest to it were deleted and removed. So there were subsequent discussions between the applicants, SNH, and ourselves about that matter. And as you'll note, SNH have withdrawn their objection on the basis of the proximity to Rahills. So again, I would urge caution. If you're going to put that in as a grounds for refusal, you don't have either SNH backing or officer backing to be able to assist at a public inquiry. You would have to demonstrate any evidence on that. I'm quite comfortable with the recommendation for refusal on MOD grounds, because that is a technical matter which the MOD can satisfactorily address or not in the view of the reporter. But certainly the Ray Hills area is the reason that the 15 turbines became 10. And again, I would urge caution if that's a ground that you're wanting to add in.
You want to come back up?
Yeah, and on that particular one, if you look at it in a roundabout way, the Hairstone ones has been added by 10. So, you know, there is that cumulative effect at the end of the day.
Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. Mr. Sutty has in part way gone to answering my question, but if I've read this completely correctly, the belt that we've got in terms of belt and braces, the belt is the MOD objection, and that seems to me to be completely clear. It's an MOD objection. It will be very difficult to get round. But what I suppose I'm asking is that if that was broken, members are trying to put some braces in as well. And we need some advice as to how substantial these braces actually can be with respect to reading this report really carefully. The braces of tourism, I think, just wouldn't stand up to it from what we're being told. Reading this report really carefully, our difficulty is that the landscape architect has talked about moderate. They've upped the game, but they've only talked about moderate impact. We are in quite a difficult position, I think, as members, having read this report and looking at it, to come up with substantive reasons that really would stand up to an appeal. I suppose I'm asking for advice with respect to what would be the most substantive reason between tourism or the Ray Hills impact that members should think about if they want to put in another reason other than the very simple, clear one that definitely will stand up, which is the MOD. So I think that's, you know, a piece of advice I need to have from the member. The other thing is that there's no question about it. You know, the objectors, Mr. and Mrs. Birchall, for example, who live really very close to what is proposed here, I don't think our policies, because again there is no room for emotion in all of this, our policies do not protect them, I don't think, because I think they are too far away. So can I have a clarity in that respect too, please?
The difficulty is obviously we have given our recommendation as officers. If members feel differently, then you can obviously have a read through the report if there's anything there that you feel will demonstrate the case. As an officer, I can't support the Ray Hills issue because that's clearly the reason that the 15 became 10, and the applicant has obviously gone some way to address that. In terms of the tourism thing, I know from experience that a reporter would not give that weight unless you were able to evidence that this proposal directly would have an adverse effect on tourism. And I think because you've got 71 turbines going to be right next door to this, I think you wouldn't have a chance to actually demonstrate that. As Vary pointed out earlier, that this is not an area of sensitivity or cumulative sensitivity in the Council's policy. So that if there were clear policy grounds now under the IPP, which was just adopted in February 2012, then we would have mentioned that. Now, obviously, there is, I will freely admit, a degree of tension to some degree that you have an objection from our landscape architect to this. That is, with any application, what officers have to do is take the different views from the different parts of the council. Some will object, some will not, and come together to a decision. Now, historically, I am aware of the fact that the landscape architect's predecessor, Sue Bennett, did have discussions with the applicant and with SNH and had not expressed the concerns that are now being expressed. It will put us in an awkward position there. I think you have to recognise that history does have some bearing in this one, that the fact that the applicants have withdrawn a third of the turbines to make the proposal acceptable to the previous landscape architect and indeed SNH has led us into that position that we are recommending it be refused, but solely on the MOD grounds. But it's obviously open to members to put anything else in, but you would have to be aware you would need to evidence that in a public inquiry. So unless you feel you've actually got strong grounds for that, that's why I'm urging caution.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Thanks, Chair. I hear what everybody's saying, and I went down the road of, the MOD, and that's a national priority, and, it'd be hard for one government agency to turn over another government agency. But where does that leave me and us, as local elected members? We've got policies, we determine them, and then we're all assuming we want to beef up the recommendation because there's going to be an appeal, and the applicant is met us halfway, if that's the terminology. But you read all this stuff, and in the answer to Councillor Maitland, you said it's hard to prove tourism because of the cumulative effect. There must be a point where the balance tips over. At the moment, we've got 71 at Minnygap, Hairstains rather, and then the 10 would be 81. Is that the tipping point? Who knows? You're determining that, then your answer to that. So I'm confused. You say we can't take on board anything that's in here from SNH or the council's architect. Yet there's pages of it. I've read this and they say, oh, right, aye. We hear from the objectors quoting this to us, yet you say, don't listen to it. We can't take any emotion from the objectors because it's not on planning grounds. We've got stuff in here, pages of it, and we're not to listen to it because it can't be formed into an objection. Why put it in here then and mislead us all? Where's the process? We have policies. We've got people we employ. If we can't take them on board, I don't know why they're always saying we don't object, but however, here's 2.5 pages of concern. What? Is that because they're frightened of because we're in conflict with the national policy? And so we're stuck in the middle as local democratic elected people to represent the people. We're stuck in the middle here. We've got developers hungry for development. We've got a policy nationally, and it's at conflict with us because we're on the ground. We understand the problems it's causing us locally. I know that's a long-winded diatribe, but I wanted to beef up the recommendations because I wanted to send a message to say there's more than just the MOD objection to this. However, you've gave reasons why we can't do it. But there is, I think, and we've got to structure that. What are we sitting here for then? If we can't apply some... We note that the SNH have put 2.5 pages of concerns. We note the architect, the landscape architect has serious reservations. And we can have all the history we like. We're where we are today. So we've got to make a decision today. Now, you're right. The strong recommendation is the MOD because that's a national policy and it's the national security. Very difficult for anybody to overturn that. However, as local Democrats, we've got a voice as well, surely. So I'm looking for help. I agree with everybody here. Let's put something in there that just gives our voice instead of just saying, well, there's the MOD, that's one. We'll hang our coat on that one nail and that's it. Because what is the point of having all these papers if we can't take recognition of it?
Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. I recognise that the position the planner's in, they've got to give advice and all that sort of thing. Now, we all know SNH, as far as we are concerned, are a nightmare. They'll fill pages objecting to something, then they say they didn't object. They're an absolute nightmare. They're a waste of space. Now, we lost a recent appeal. It was only last week or so we got the email about it. And one of the reasons the reporter wouldn't consider something because we hadn't put it into our decision making. And I think that, as far as I'm concerned, that's where I'm coming from, that we need to beef up our reasons. And if they're in there when the reporter's got to decide them, and with all due respect to yourselves, I don't think the reporter will bother about the MOD or anybody. They'll just ride roughshod over us and overturn any decision that we make. And tourism, to use that as an argument, the difficulty there is, as you know, is measuring the effect, because it's going to be in the next 5-10 years that you've got to measure that effect. But the turbines are up and you're never going to take them down because there's been a reduction in tourism. If I could just raise a point, under reservations, right at the bottom, page 28 of 154, the concern that the proposed turbine height and perceived scale of these turbines in relation to the features of settled in Farn Valley, including Ray Hill's inventory, Minnygap will bring wind farm development into a more prominent position compared to Hairstains. Now, is that no a justification for refusal? We're trying to keep these as, you can't say invisible, but remote as possible. And as somebody's already said, when's enough enough? It's all right saying, oh, we've reduced from 15 to 10, so that's all right. But probably we'd better reduce it to nothing. And then that effect wouldn't be there at all. So I would ask that we maybe consider putting the cumulative effect as an objection in. And as I say, I'm not getting at the planners. They've got a hard enough job trying to appease everybody without trying to appease us. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. David?
Just to make it clear to Councillor Ogilvie, I think at no stage did I say that you can't make this and these things aren't material considerations. They clearly are. What I am saying to you is that in your decision making, you have to be satisfied you have sufficient evidence that if you're in the hot seat of public inquiry, are you comfortable that you have the evidence to support this? It's not just a knee-jerk view. In answer to Councillor McKee's comments, I think if you are going to put in extra things, I think that's probably your strongest. The tourism I would stay well away from for the reason that it's very, very difficult to actually evidence that this proposal would in itself deter tourism. But if you're actually going to hook it onto anything, then obviously the landscape architect's comments are the ones which I would suggest are the ones that give you greatest comfort.
I've got quite a few speakers down here. Councillor Geddes, Dempster, Dryburgh and Ogilvie and McCaughey. I'll have you first then, because the rest have all spoken. Microphone, please.
Thank you. I think we've given this a sufficient airing. I don't hear anybody in favour of it. And the trouble we're getting into now is you're putting forward, trying to find other reasons here, on top of the main reason for refusal. You're being advised by the professional planner that it probably get thrown out. Now, bearing in mind the applicant is here, you can put whatever else you want in. If the professional planner's now said it wouldn't stand up in an appeal, the first thing the applicant's going to say at an appeal is, well, look, that was the view of the planning committee, but the professional planners and the council said, you're wasting your time doing it because it will not stand up in this court. Now, if nobody is in favour of this particular application, I would move that we refuse it on the grounds given, and bearing in mind, it's the MOD trying to comply with an international nuclear treaty ban. Now, they are unlikely to change their mind under pressure from the British government, and now the Scottish government's changed its policy on nuclear weapons. They're unlikely to change it either. So I would move that we would take the recommendation as it is, and let's move on to other business. We've got other people waiting to hear their cases.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, I'm afraid I don't agree with that, sir, because I go back to the submissions that were made. You know, at the end of the day, we go through a consultative process. We have a consultee here called the Council Landscape Architect. That employee has made it perfectly clear that his or her views are that this should be refused, apart from anything else, on the impact on land. And as I said right at the start, Chairman, if you take the first two bullet points at the top of page 28, Minnygap Heights is important as undeveloped ground that has positive functions contributing to landscape diversity and contrast, and as part of the setting of Hairstains. The area reduces the perceived scale of the Hairstains turbines and helps to integrate the development into the local Annandale landscape. And the second point, which to me has even more resonance, the Minnygap turbines would have a significant impact both in themselves and cumulatively, and stress the word cumulatively, in combination with Hairstains and local and mid-range receptors up to 12 kilometres by extending wind farm development onto the valley side of Annandale. Should Newfield wind farm be consented, there will be additional cumulative impact concerns. That, to me, is the reasonable expression of a view by a professionally qualified officer of this council, and I think on that basis, sir, that should certainly be included in any reason for refusal of this application. And insofar as the tourism issue is concerned, again, I hear what Mr. Sutty is saying, but if you go to specific concerns which are mentioned at the bottom of page 34, I don't think, what's being said there is unreasonable. In fact, I think, we as a committee should toughen up the language. Okay, you get to a public inquiry and you're asked, what, in fact, are your grounds for saying that? Perhaps one of the responses might very well be, we have anecdotal evidence, as Councillor Ogilvie has said, elected members, serving communities in Dumfries and Galloway. And perhaps maybe we can turn the question back to the questioner at any hypothetical, as it were, public hearing by saying, do you have any evidence to prove the contrary to our views? Maybe that should be borne in mind. Maybe it's about time that the worms did turn. Long overdue. So I am still of the view, in fact, that we should be incorporating these two subsidiary, and I stress subsidiary, grounds of refusal into the main thrust of the recommendation in the report. As I say, and I would be prepared to go as far as to move that if necessary.
Mr. Mail.
Chair, can I say that I tend to agree with Councillor Geddes, so long as it is subsidiary. If my seconder will agree, then I'll be prepared to accept that.
Would you be in agreement with that, Alistair?
I'm trying desperately to get consensus, sir. I'd like to see us all sign up.
Dennis is willing to accept it if you agree that those are subsidiary to the main.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Yeah, I'll agree with that. Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. If Vary can shut that box in the bottom of the image for me, I would say, I think Jock McKee's been reading my scribblings, by the way. There's your evidence for cumulative impact. Look at that. Take that and show that to somebody and ask them, how on earth is that no cumulative impact in one small area at Dumfries and Galloway? It most definitely is. And maybe sympathetically, the cumulative impact of a number of different reasons for objection would have far more effect than a single one. But that was a sort of the last question, and I'm sure the answer will be the one I expect to hear. At what stage in the application process is the allocation of this budget that the MOD talk about? In other words, is the Minnygap one, is it last in for the allocation? Because if no, we've then got a problem. Have the allocations been made in all the other sites that are there and pending in advance of Minnygap coming forward?
As far as I understand it, and don't pretend to be the expert on this, it is chronological. It's whoever comes in first gets their application considered in the budget.
That's what I hoped in here, Chair. So I would definitely say cumulative impact. And the last thing I'd say about that, Chair, is I don't know that we have a landscape architect employed now. And if we have, that landscape architect doesn't deal with all the plan applications. And some occasions we employ consultants. But we need to be saying to them, there is a major issue now about cumulative impact that has to be considered. And we have to have maps like that landscape architects look at, because it's far more important than just the general undulations of the landscape they're looking at. It has to be the cumulative impact and how we're going to deal with that over the next 25 years and beyond.
Just for clarification, yes, we do have a landscape architect, Janet Swales, who is working full-time on wind farms.
Well, I'm pleased because at one time we hadn't it, and we did bring in consultants, but I'm pleased with one now.
Councillor Driver.
Councillor Geddes covered the points I was going to cover. So.
I'm in agreement with Councillor Mail. Is really moved that we move to the recommendation to, and I'm happy to take in the amendment as long as it's clearly shown that it's a supplementary, it's a subsidiary reason. The primary reason is the position with the MOD, and I don't think anybody in the room who's objecting would hear what the reason was. It's the outcome they'd be interested in.
Thank you. If I confirm then my understanding, and I would ask then the movers of both the motion and amendment just to confirm whether I've got my understanding correct. We have a motion put forward by Councillor Mail, which has been seconded by Councillor Ferguson, which is to the effect of sorry, I think it was actually Councillor Ferguson that did the kind of like the first, which was that the primary move refusal on MOD ground, and then subsequently the wording of that motion got amended but I'm happy to be corrected. But I did have my record, following the logic, was Councillor Mayle, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. And it was Councillor Geddes then adding in, and they were agreeing changes to that motion. Happy? Thank you. Thank you. Then on that basis, then the motion is to move refusal for the grounds as detailed in the report, which is the primary reason associated with the MOD objection. And in addition, which is reflecting then the views as stated, which is the committee would be giving weight, if this motion was adopted, to the views of the Council's landscape architect in respect of the cumulative impact of the development as articulated in the bullet points, the first and second bullet points at page 28 of members' reports. I could read it out, but members happy, that's it. And
Carl, but would it be the bottom of that page and as well, are you quite happy that's sufficient on the top two bullet points?
I was taking the views as articulated that it was the first two bullet points.
Okay, that'll be fine. Okay. Sorry to stop you.
In addition, the motion then would give weight to the concerns as articulated on the bottom paragraph of page 34 about the impact on tourism, particularly on the impact of those who enjoy walking in the country, in this particular part of the countryside. So therefore the motion is primary as per the report, MOD objection, but then in addition we have weight being given to the landscape architect's views on cumulative impact as articulated in the first two bullet points, and in addition giving other weight then to the impact particularly on the walking and the impact then on that local community. So that's the bottom paragraph, page 34. The amendment then put forward by Councillor McCorktree, seconded by Councillor Maitland, is to refuse on grounds as detailed in the report. So we have the motion, which is refusal, and I'm sorry about the power outage. I really must find out. I've been logging when it's happening. Okay, we obviously haven't paid our bills, so I'm sorry. But then, so we have the motion then, which is the primary reason for refusal is given in the reports, plus the additions on cumulative impact, giving weight to landscape architect, and also the impact then on tourism as evidenced by those who enjoy walking in the countryside, page 34. The amendment then by Councillor McCorktree, seconded by Councillor Maitland, refused on grounds as detailed in the report. Chairman.
Motion.
Vice Chairman. Councillor Dempster. Councillor Dryborough. Councillor Ferguson.
Motion.
Councillor Geddes. Councillor Gilroy. Leader. Councillor Yin. Councillor McCorktree. Councillor McKee. Councillor Maitland. Councillor Ogilvie. Councillor Tuckfield. The motion is carried. By 12 votes to 2, there being 40 members present. The application has been refused.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Just to answer the technical question that Carol, it's when the fan goes off that blows the heat. There must be a power spike that's affecting your IT stuff. So if you want to tell an electrician about that, that'd be fine.
I was going to say something, but I'll not bother. Item 5 has been previously indicated has been withdrawn. Item 6 on the agenda is change of use of part of domestic garage / store to form a beauty salon, Class 2, at 20 Beeches Avenue, Cargenbridge, Dumfries. Claire Eckstein, please.
Thank you, Chair. technology working? This proposal is for the change of use of part of domestic garage store to form a beauty salon, which, as noted in the report, the use of the beauty salon is for Daniel Sheridan, who resides at 20 Beeches Avenue in Cargenbridge. This location plan shows the application site at the end of the cul-de-sac, Beeches Avenue, on the southern end of Cargenbridge. This is the block plan, which shows the garage store subject to the application and the existing and proposed parking spaces. This is the floor plan showing the existing and proposed internal alterations with the store at the front remaining, which is 3.7 metres long, and then the beauty treatment room, preparation room, waiting area, with a floor area of approximately 26 square metres. These photographs show the application site from Beeches Avenue. The garage store is parked behind the white van, which is parked in the driveway. And this is taken from the rear of the property, with the garage store building to the right-hand side and the existing house to the left. And this is back to the front of Beeches Avenue, showing the driveway with the proposed additional parking area, which will be behind the grey 5-stone wall, and the end of the cul-de-sac with the grassed access into the adjoining area of public open space. Just to summarise, the key issues in determining the planning application are, firstly, the principal development, which, as paragraph 4.3 in the report notes, is for a beauty salon, which is a Class 2 use, but due to the similarities of this use to Class 1 retail, the planning policies are on retail development in the development plan provide guidance on a development proposal such as this. In particular, we've referred to small-scale retail development under Structure Plan Policy D20. It's considered that the minor scale of the development, combined with the nature of the operation, which will be normally by appointment, and the fact that the applicant resides at the house, helps to make the proposal acceptable. Secondly, in terms of road and pedestrian safety, the council roads officer raised no objections, subject to conditions requiring further additional parking, and that the proposal was a personal permission. And thirdly, in terms of residential amenity, it is recognised that the proposal is small scale and that due to the position of the existing doors and windows, it does not create any additional privacy or overlooking issues for adjoining premises. Therefore, in conclusion, as the report notes in paragraph 4.15, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions noted.
Thank you, Claire. Could you just go back a slide, please? Yeah. The building on the right is the building in question.
Yes.
And the building on the left
is the applicant's house.
And this kind of bit here with the lintels in the block.
That's a sort of wall with lintels.
Right.
There isn't any roofing or anything over the top of it. Just a plain wall with a couple of lintels on it.
So if you go, could you go back another slide or two, please? Just slowly, because back again. Back to the plan, if you could, just to clarify this in my mind. No, before that. So, where these parking spaces are straight off from the drive. The drive's at the bottom of that plan, is that correct?
Yes.
So
it's upside down, but I've sort of made it the right way up so that when you're viewing it, that's it coming off Beeches Avenue.
You're claiming there's 3 parking spaces in the drive plus 1 in the sort of front of the house there.
That one is the one extra that is proposed by a planning condition.
Any members, any other questions for Councillor McKee?
It's just the operating hours, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Maybe the applicant's agent might address it when they're talking to us, rather than you trying to answer it. Or if you've got an answer, Claire, that'll do fine.
I'm afraid I don't have an answer what the operating hours are, what was put on the application form. So we've taken it from that.
Councillor Maitland.
Yes, thank you. It's the issue really of our policies. And there's no question about it that what we're trying to do is to reuse sites within town, rather, I think, than develop sites in suburban areas, is what I think our policies are attempting to do. I'm quite surprised at the use of this policy with respect to this suggestion. Is it the case that what I'm really trying to get at is a shop, one imagines, is somewhere you just go into on an ad hoc basis, whereas something which is in class 2, professional, financial and other services, you do go by appointment. So I would have said actually there was something which you could really distinguish between a shop and class 2, because a shop is something you go to without having an appointment to go to it, whereas class 2, you go to for other services. And it seems to me that we are quite keen on supporting shops within areas, suburban areas, to support people living there. But I think we're rather less keen in terms of our policies about developing business uses which actually probably should be assisting footfall in the centre of our town. Because, the last thing we want to do is create a system where we can actually just allow this to happen regularly, taking away from the footfall in the centre of town. I don't think that's what our policies are trying to achieve. So that's really my question. It's the distinction between a shop and the professional, the financial, professional and other services.
Mr. Sutty.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if you look at page 78 of the agenda, paragraph 4.3, that does actually deal with this. Councillor Maitland's quite correct. Our policies are not primarily geared to look at this type of activity. But if you look at the definition of a class 2 use, I mean, class 2 includes everything from a doctor's surgery, dentist. It does include beauticians as well. It does say appropriate to provide in a shopping area and where services are provided principally to visiting members of the public. That's the definition of class 2 use. Now, would we look for a large medical centre to be right in the middle of a residential estate? Well, maybe it depends on what it is. It has to be looked at on a fact and degree basis, and it is made clear that due to the size of this, at the end of that paragraph, 26 square metres, policy D20 is considered to be relevant for this type of proposal. The thrust of the policy is trying to keep class 1, class 2 uses into the town centre, but it is really looking at this on a fact and degree basis of the scale of this, and subject to the very specific and pretty onerous conditions that you've got on page 80, in particular conditions 2 and 3 that really would pin that down to being A, just for the applicant, and B, it could only be used for this specific purpose by this specific person even. So you couldn't use it for anything else falling within class 2, or to have a change of use which would be automatically granted by the use classes order and permitted development order to, for example, a class 1 shop. And it's also saying you can't sell it, lease it or otherwise dispose of it. It's got to be tied to this property. So it's on the basis of the proposal and subject to conditions, we've considered it to be acceptable on its specific merits, but it would be probably taking things too far to have policies that will cover every eventuality. And this is a particularly unusual proposal looked at on a fact and degree basis. It's considered to be acceptable.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, I have some concerns about the sort of drawing that's on the picture. If parking space one's a client who's in for getting their nails done, say, just to show, the wife used to be a beautician, or beauty therapist, just in case
She gave up when she married you.
The second one's possibly having a massage. How does parking space 1 next to thing get out past car 2? Now, it also states that it's for the use of Mr. and Mrs. Sheridan and Miss D. Sheridan. Now, if all three pass their HND for beauty therapy, then that's 3 clients that could be in there, and there isn't sufficient car parking spaces there for the clients that would be using it. I have concerns that it would then block up the hammerhead. And what can we do to make sure that doesn't happen?
You may want to address that point. I think you're getting the rough end of the stick here, Claire.
Speak. If you look at the floor plan, we were obviously just going back to the who's allowed to use it in terms of that condition. Obviously, the application has been made by the applicants, who are Mr. and Mrs. Sheridan. So obviously, in order to link that back to the application, we've added their names to it, and obviously it was also put in as a the sole trader was obviously their daughter, so that's also been added to the condition as well. So that tightens it up. So it's basically saying who resides there, works on the premises. If you look at the floor plan itself, I'm no expert on beauty treatments, but you can see that there's sort of one treatment and room and a sort of small waiting area. So just with the type of use and with a sort of appointment system, it's unlikely that you're going to get sort of too much of a crossover in terms of traffic overlapping or people parking, with that happening at the site. So I think we consider, given the scale of it, there's only going to be, a limit in terms of the number of staff that are actually going to be able to work there at the site.
Okay. Councillor Gilroy.
Can I just ask about the recommendation 3, which ensure the benefit of the present applicants, namely Mr. and Mrs. Sheridan and their daughter, Ms. D. Sheridan. Does that mean that they're the only ones that are allowed to work there? Or, they could presumably, I'm quite anxious also about the hours of activity from 10 till 10, I think, which is too long in a residential area. But they could employ other people, other beauticians. It doesn't restrict them to being the only ones that are actually working there, does it?
Basically, the wording of the condition is such that the permission would be for their benefit only. And again, as Claire was saying, by the size of the development, it's not anticipated that you would have other people employed there. It is solely for the applicant.
But it doesn't make it impossible.
Any other questions for Claire at this stage? No? Okay, thank you. We have 3 speakers. First one is Mr. Wallace. Mr. Wallace, you've got 3 minutes.
It was interesting to hear all the debate beforehand, because that seems to have, in actual fact, raised quite a few of the concerns that I personally have with the application itself. Because, initially the roads people objected to this application, and it was only on the basis of supplementary information and business details that it was for the daughter only. She actually works full-time elsewhere, and this will be on a sort of ad hoc, occasional basis to try to get her to build up her business, that they changed the recommendation to refuse and seem to make a specific exception to it on the basis that if there's a change in circumstances, they might reconsider matters. Now, the condition that you've got now allows Mr. and Mrs. Sheridan to locate their businesses there too, in yours for the sole benefit of those parties as well. Very generous hours of operation as well for it, such that why would Danielle want to go into a town centre location? She can locate there, she's got all the hours that she needs if circumstances change and the business does take off and she's in a position to leave her other job. And there's also the consideration of this sort of use being a shop. I think it's an interpretation of that policy too far. And whilst I applaud the council for trying to help Danielle along the lines to become established, I think you've got to temper that with the fact that such a generous and wide interpretation of it does result in the real concern that I've got is that any other sole trader across the region, it's not just Dumfries here either, looking at this will be seeing the opportunity that, well, in actual fact, whilst I'm a class 2, I can really be a shop if I'm relatively small, modest, single operator, and I can then, you know, operate from my house or residential areas. And that seems to fly in the face and be counterproductive towards the council's drive. You know, you've repeated initiatives regarding the necessity to have businesses locate. Businesses such as this, Class 2, the Scottish Government advises this is the sort of operation you expect to find in a town centre. Circular 1 of 1998 says, where the services are provided principally to visiting members of the public, you expect it in a town centre. And I think, as I say, whilst I applaud the planners
30 seconds, Mr. Fallis.
Thank you, for trying to help Danielle in this particular circumstances, I think it's putting you in a difficult position because I think it's a step too far because it's given a bit of a green light for anybody else who's a sole trader in a Class 2 business use with any town or village centre across the region to potentially relocate to their house itself, because it would now appear, according to the report, it's bang in line with your policies, and I think that's a stretch and an interpretation too far that you need to be very mindful of this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Fallis. Any questions for Mr. Fallis? Councillor Hislop.
Mr. Fallis, would you accept that if there was a mobile bed put in the treatment room and a couple of deck chairs in the other part, you could keep this as an actual store and you wouldn't need planning permission for this because it's only set up sometimes? You know, if you take, some people do hairdressing from home, and as long as it's not set up full time, you could run a hairdresser's in that position as well if wished, and you tidied it up at the end of the day.
I've got some sympathy with the planners in the context of this type of case. It's all a matter of fact and degree. Because I'm a sole trader, I operate from home, but I don't have any visiting members of the public. All my business is conducted elsewhere. So if I have to meet clients, I'll go to their premises or go to their site or anything like that. So in that sense, I'm within the sort of general accepted idea that that's tolerable within a residential property. You then get the situation where you may get the odd occasional appointment, 1 or 2, maybe 2 or 3 a week, and the planners have then got the idea of when does it go from just incidental to that person's enjoyment of the residential property to an actual genuine, full-blown Class 2 business operation. Now that has been assessed here and that has been accepted by the planners, hence the requirement for the planning application. They've considered that because of the scale of the operation, 2 or 3 appointments on a daily basis, whether it's 60 minutes, 90 minutes or whatever, if that's what's going, that's sufficient to tip it from just the odd occasional thing like you're saying, Mr. Hislop, with regards to benches, 1 or 2 folk occasionally, most of it's done elsewhere, but just 1 or 2 home visits. Here, it's been identified and it's been created and it's been presented to you as a full-blown formal business. That is why the application is here, and that's for your determination.
Any further questions for Mr. Fallis from members? No, thank you very much, Mr. Fallis. You can take your seat.
Thank you.
I have a Mr. Kenneth Mooney now.
Good afternoon, Kenneth Mooney.
You have 3 minutes, Mr. Mooney.
Neighbour. I must start by quoting planning a year and a half ago, where the original planning consent states that the garage shall not be used for any purpose other than a purpose incidental to the enjoyment of the dwelling house. As such, no independent trade or business shall be carried out therein or therefrom. This was a year and a half ago. How things change. Within weeks of completion, the garage was being fitted out and converted over months into a beauty salon. About 4 months ago, I approached Mr. and Mrs. Sheridan and asked them if they were starting a business. They denied this. A month later, unfamiliar cars started to arrive and the clients were directed to the beauty salon. Is this the way forward for planning? Build, fit the interior, and when cut out, apply for planning permission. If this is the case, the property has already started its next project. With a shell of a building, which you were talking about, the lintels, there is a building there which I suspect has no planning permission. It's not a wall, it is a building. Will we be back in a year's time, looking for planning consent for, I don't know, a tanning studio or something? In the planning report, there is no mention that Mrs. Sheridan already has business premises on Galloway Street in the same line of business. Surely this is the proper location for Danielle to be working her trade. In fact, will this shop be next, lying empty and derelict in the Dumfries town centre because of permission for a beauty salon in a residential area? Watch this space. I suspect there must be other businesses looking at the outcome of this decision to decide their way forward. On the planning application, it was described as not being full-blown business, which I suppose means part-time. Then for some reason, the planning department gives it from 10 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, Monday to Friday. And Saturday, 10 o'clock morning, 5 o'clock at night. An operating time of 6 to 7 hours. Not bad for not being fully blown. I suppose full-blown must be 24/7. So now I submit that the report should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Mooney? Members? Mrs. Maitland.
I was just wondering what he was reading from. You could just explain, please, from which document he was reading in the very early part of his submission.
The year and a half ago, it was the original planning permission a year and a half ago, that the garage got planning permission for domestic and domestic use and storage, which is a year and a half ago, yes. And as I say, things have changed dramatically since then.
Councillor Heslop.
Same question is asked, Mr. Wallace. Do you accept that under the planning terms of the use of that garage, it could be a part-time use? Because I know of 2 or 3 that have been in the past where at the end of the day, you just tidy up and you then have a garage or a store back. Would you accept that?
So could you just repeat that? I'm sorry, yeah.
Under planning terms, my understanding is if it was to be within the actual, say, the kitchen of the house, you could run a business, part-time business, and at the end of the day, if you take out the equipment, the hair dryers, etc., it's back to a kitchen. Therefore, you don't need planning permission for that.
Mm-hmm.
Would you accept this could be the same?
For here?
Yes.
No, because I've got proof that there's more as one person using it as well, like, yeah. Well, there is more as one beauty therapist there that's using the facilities.
Okay. Any further questions for gentleman, Mr. Mooney? No? Okay, Mr. Mooney, thank you very much. You can take your seat. Now go to Mr. McConaughey, please.
My name's Hamish McConaughey.
Mr. McConaughey, 3 minutes.
Sorry, acting on behalf of the applicants. I've just written down some points here, but it's just going along with it's speaking in support of the application, obviously. And I've just one under the terms of the report. So you can, like I said, just I'd like to say under the principle of development. The basically limited use of this business and the siting of the facility and the detached building within the enclosed curtilage of the property, in my opinion, for the limited use, makes this an ideal location for this development. The report goes on about dramatically increasing traffic and such like, but the fact that it's going to be on an appointment basis only and times are staggered to allow for clean-up between appointments, there's not going to be a dramatic increase in traffic at all to this neighbourhood. A large number of probable clients and actually people that have written in support of this application are local people as well, and they have actually said that they would welcome this, and they're quite happy to travel by means of foot traffic. A lot of the times of operation, a lot of the resident vehicles actually vacate the street during kind of working days, and the street is obviously a lot quieter. So this start time will not increase the amount of traffic that Beeches Avenue is capable of dealing with. One of the things I like to say, and I think it's been brought up by some of the members, that it's a fine distinction between what needs planning permission and what doesn't. There's numerous business have started up in dwelling houses throughout Dumfries and small towns where people are carrying out a function within the house, within a room, and they're quite entitled to do that as long as they meet guidelines without needing planning permission. We're trying to obviously make this in a separate building, but you kind of must highlight it's still within the curtilage of the dwelling. It isn't using it to any greater extent than what is readily acceptable for people working from home. One of the things I would go on to say is that, and a lot of people have mentioned about the times, I did try to go onto the council website the other day to look at the form to see what I had put in for times, because I didn't remember, to be quite honest, and it was a surprise to me that the late
30 seconds, sir.
Of 10 p.m. So I did speak to Claire, but the actual page wasn't on the website. It was missing. There was only the front and back pages. And in terms of the applicant and things like that, we are quite happy you can agree with anybody if they think there's a suitable timescale that it can be used. We've always said that from the outset when the application was lodged. And we're quite willing to take that on board. Obviously, in respect of that, and the fact that this isn't a full-time business by any means, it isn't the intention. Danielle is a sole trader, and if anybody thinks there's two people working in there, well, they have to prove the evidence of that.
Going to have to stop you there, please.
Okay, thank you. So I just recommend support of the application in the context it will be used.
Councillor Hislop.
Mr McConaughey mentioned that the proposal was to have staggered times. Why is there a requirement for a waiting room?
That is the layout, as was reported earlier on, and in the report by the planning, there had been obviously work carried out to this building, but at the time when they visited, the building was not in use. There was no equipment in it or anything like that, so it wasn't being used for a business capacity. That was the layout there. It was entailed. If there's a need to reduce the size of that and do away with a waiting area, then that's fine. There might be somebody arrive early. We can't control that. If somebody suddenly decides to turn up 5-10 minutes earlier because they were in the area, there's little control we can have in that. So that's still the reason why that's sitting there, basically.
Any other questions? Councillor McCoughtry?
Yeah. Could you go back? Could I ask to go back in the plans to the one with the parking, please? Yeah. Could I just ask the applicant's agent, how does somebody who's disabled, particularly with a wheelchair, access the premises?
Well, you could see the spaces are tight to the house, but there is a space of 900 millimetres there when you scale off the drawing. So now you can get through with a wheelchair a door width of 7.75 millimetres.
I doubt very much if somebody in a wheelchair, and I've looked at the site, somebody in a wheelchair could get out of a car, get into their wheelchair, and then access the premises without reversing every other motor into the cul-de-sac.
You've got to be
in terms of access for the disabled, you're pretty limited there.
You've got to bear in mind that that plan was only provided to show that we had enough parking spaces to serve the domestic dwelling house. So the people that are in the house do work themselves, so they won't be there during the operation of this business.
So you're telling me that every applicant in that house is going to be outside, not going to have their cars parked there between 10 a.m. in the morning and 10 at night? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's going to vary. It's going to
Right.
vary. But
in which case there are going to be times.
I have measured the space at the side, and when I did that, there is ample space for a wheelchair to traverse between the house wall and the parking space for the cars. And round the back, it is all level, and there is an access ramp going to be proposed if we get approval to go into the actual unit itself.
Well, I think we go back to the other photograph, the one with the van in it. You can see there now a van slightly wider than a motor car, and that is not a level surface to travel on anyway. No indication in the plans that that is going to be totally resurfaced. So I would say in terms of access for the disabled, it ain't very suitable.
Any further comments, sir?
Well, at the end of the day, we don't have an approval, so we haven't looked into every aspect of this. Under the disability requirement regulations, we will, if it does get approval for the usage intended, we will have to look at that and make provision for that.
Any other questions of the agent? No? Okay, sir, you can take your seat. Thank you. We're in session, ladies and gentlemen. Councillor McCaughey.
Yep. Well, I think I've no objection to anybody starting up a business, but I think the point's been made. There are plenty of empty business premises within Dumfries. Indeed, we're trying to encourage people to start businesses within Dumfries. I really don't feel that that there is a suitable premise for a business. If you actually look at the roadway, it's quite a narrow road there anyway, and the turning point is quite narrow. There's refuse collection vehicles go up there, that's their turning point. If there's car parked like they are there, it's very, very difficult for refuse collection vehicles, delivery vehicles to access there. And I think at the end of the day, it is a residential area. It is not, it's not an area with the only shop in the area is way at the other end of the village, and it was purpose built at the time the area was constructed. And as I said, it doesn't look suitable premises to have that kind of business anyway. I've highlighted the fact that I think disabled people would find it very, very hard to access. It is in a cul-de-sac. And, you know, in fairness, the neighbours there did not object last year when this committee gave permission, or permission was given, to extend the garage. I think it tells you there in 1.8 on page 74 that it was recognised it was an extension of the garage to form a garage cum store. And all that's happened is that this extension has now been used to highlight this application here. So on these grounds that it's not a suitable premise, I would move that it be refused because it's contrary to policy D20 in that it could cause undue traffic problems and certainly have a material adverse effect on the amenity of the surrounding area. And also it's contrary to local plan GP1 and 7A. And I would move. I would point out again that if it was a business anyway, it's no need to be open till 10 a.m. at night, from 10 in the morning till 10 at night. I find that, again, that goes against the amenity of the area. People continually coming and going in these hours. So I would move refusal.
Councillor Gilroy.
Thank you. Well, I would be happy to second Councillor McCaughey on this. I actually am, I was quite unhappy when I read this. I think it's a retrospective kind of application, which I'm never very keen on. If you look at paragraph 1.4, and I just want to go back to the planning history at 1.8. You know, the extension of the garage, it's very specific that it was not to be used for independent trade or business. And suddenly it's changing. And I think we've got policies that say that we should be using our towns. I think this is a residential area. I think it should be kept that way. I think it's inappropriate. And I'd be very happy to second Councillor Coughlin.
Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. I am in entire agreement with Councillors McCockery and Gilroy. I think it is quite clear the broad aim of the development plan policies and SPP on retail development is to ensure the reuse of sites within the town centre. And that is absolutely essential, bearing in mind we are trying to regenerate and revitalise our town. If we start to unpick that sort of arrangement, we are in grave danger, I think, of undermining our own policies. So I'm more than happy to hear what my fellow councillors are saying.
Councillor Heslop.
Chair, I take a different view. I have some degree of support for the proposal. However, I have concerns with regard to parking. And I don't know how we can actually tie it in that there will only be one operative working out of this establishment at any time. Because if we do start bringing in mum and dad doing the nails while someone else is doing something else somewhere else, you know, I think there's a chance that you would have a traffic problem in this location. And that is my big concern. I don't know how we can actually look at condition 3 somewhere and actually look to limit that to one operative, and that being, is it Miss Sheridan, who's actually the beauty therapist, that she will be the only person working in that establishment. And I also have concerns with regard to the time scale, and I would have thought 8 o'clock at night was by far late enough to be working and to give some degree of comfort to the residences either side that, you know, after 8 o'clock at night you'll not be getting cars trundling up there on a regular basis. But I don't know if there's any wording that the officer could reassure me under recommendation 3 there.
Chair, yes, I mean, the hours of operation in condition 4 recommended, it's entirely open to yourself to vary that as you see fit. So you can make it from 10 until 8 o'clock at night. That's quite legitimate. Indeed, condition 3 as well, you could just add in something else saying that you know, the permission shall inure for the benefit. In other words, it remains for them, and also add in something else about that for the avoidance of doubt, it shall be solely a single trader, namely Ms. D. Sheridan, and no other party shall be employed or work from the property. And that would be quite legitimate.
Chair, with that added in, I would be happy to move that we approve the recommendations that it's the sole trader and it's only Miss D. Sheridan that works in there, and that we move to a terminal hour of 8 o'clock at night, 2000 hours.
Councillor Tuckfield.
And I would be happy to second that.
We have a motion, we have an amendment. Anybody else wish to say anything? Councillor Ogilvie. Is this a counter amendment?
No, as a point of clarification from the planning officer, in Mr. Fallis's submission to us, he said be careful about setting a precedent. How many garages could be turned into beauty salons or whatever. I don't have to worry about hair dryers. But seriously, do we set a precedent? I know we have to look at it on its own merits, but how could we turn down another application if it's structured in the same way? So I'm just asking your opinion. I'll put you on the spot a bit there, David, but are we in danger of setting a precedent if we agree this?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's the same old case of, it's a matter of fact and degree as to where each change from something that doesn't require planning permission to requiring planning permission occurs. Mr. Wallace was absolutely correct on that. This is obviously one of these ones where we normally take the view that if you are working from your premises, as indeed Mr. Wallace does, as a sole trader, but you're not bringing people into the property, that's fine. That's ancillary to the dwelling house. And the use classes order makes that clear for class 9, which are houses. As soon as you are bringing people in and you're providing a service to them at your property, that's where we normally say, well, hang on, that's if it's on a regular basis, that is something where a change of use has taken place. I don't think this is setting a precedent. Each one has to be looked at on its own merits. You'll have seen the conditions which are recommended and indeed adapted in Councillor Hipsop's motion. on that basis it is considered in this specific instance to be acceptable, but it certainly isn't a present problem. In terms of, if I could just come in with the motion for refusal, there was a number of things floating around there. Picking up on what you've said, it's the age-old thing about throwing in policies. We've already given you the policy interpretation. I think you can say the same thing in a slightly different manner, which I would say would be competent as a motion, that basically what I read, what you were saying is that this particular premises is not appropriate or suitable to be used for this particular business, on the basis that it is an activity that would better take place in the town centre, and that you have concerns about the effect on the residential amenity from the activity that this would introduce, particularly in respect of movement of vehicles and car parking. I think if you said it in those terms, I would say that's competent ground for review.
Thank you, Chairman. Then can I ask then the mover and seconder if they're happy then with the rewording as offered by the planning officer? Okay. Thank you. So in effect, what we have, and I don't know whether the words are there, if he's written them down. But okay, I have.
I can summarise it. Basically, that this property would not be a suitable property for carrying out the Class 2 activity proposed, as it's an activity which would be better located in the town centre, and that you have that the development would be likely to raise issues of concern about residential amenity and vehicle movements, road safety, that sort of issue.
We therefore have a motion which is effectively then to refuse on the grounds that it's as detailed by the planning officer. We have an amendment put forward by the leader, seconded by Councillor Tuckfield, which is to approve the application subject to amendments to the conditions, which would apply to one operative with a terminal hour of 8 p.m. Members happy then? The motion is to refuse. The amendment is to approve, subject to a change in the conditions. Chairman.
Amen.
Vice Chairman. Councillor Dempster. Councillor Dryborough. Councillor Ferguson.
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes. Councillor Gilroy. Leader. Councillor Yen. Councillor McCourtry. Councillor McKee. Councillor Maitland. Councillor Ogilvie. Councillor Tuckfield. We have the motion carried by 8 votes to 6. The application has been refused.
We now come to a very thorny point, thorny item on the agenda, which is lunch. I did ask a short time ago where lunch would be served, and a note has just been passed to me which says no lunch has arrived as they forgot, in inverted commas, DG first, not us. So I'll take that up with the chairman immediately. We have a recess here, and they're making it now, but it will take about half an hour to get here. Now, as the next item on the agenda might take some time, I would propose that we stop now and wait for lunch and have lunch and get back here as soon as we can. Okay? So we will say as soon after 1:30 as we can make it.
You have to come back at 1:30 then with sandwiches.
As far as I'm concerned, because I like my lunch. The next item on the agenda is item 7, and it's the erection of 10 semi-detached, single-storey and storey-and-a-half affordable houses, associated works including formation of service roads, parking area and underground surface water drainage at St Medan's, Monreith. Mr Murray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you say, this is an application for planning permission for 10 affordable houses at Monreith. I'll just take you through a number of the slides. This is a view of the approach to the site. The houses on the left to the red roofs are the existing houses at St Medans, Monreith. This is a view of the same approach road on the other side. The green area on the right is the existing amenity space and play area. That actually forms part of the site, but simply by virtue of the fact that the underground surface water drainage scheme will be within that area. This is a view of the site from the turning head at the end of the cul-de-sac at St Medans. So the site itself is the grassed area beyond the fence there. And that's just a view of the site itself. It's just an area of agricultural land at the moment. You'll see the caravan site beyond that in the distance. This is a view of the existing play area. There's reference in the report, of course, to the play area itself and the question of open space and upgrading the existing play equipment. This is a view back down the access road from the turning head. So that's me standing with my back to the site at the moment. I should point out in that view that you will have noted that there is a proposal for 6 additional parking spaces to be provided alongside St Medans. They will be on the left there, just kind of on the line of that lighting pole that you see on the left. So the road will be widened there and 6 parallel parking spaces provided in that location. That's an aerial view of the site. It looks a bit skewed in that view, but the site itself is probably the easiest reference point is the caravan site that you can pick out just right and below centre. The square, there's a gap between the caravan site, a kind of bottom left to top right strip of land, and then there's a defined grass square there. That is the site, and then you can pick up the red roofs of the houses at St Medans to the left of that, and of course the amenity area and Place fronting it. I mean, I think I would ask you to note in that view the main characteristics of the settlement at Monreith are its linear nature alongside the road. It's evolved from that to have development to the rear in terms of St Medans and up the road there, up the track there towards Blairboy, and also there's a pocket of development to the south of the main road down towards the beach. You can see a number of properties down there. These are the plans provided by the applicant. This is the layout plan. The plans show this and the following application, which is the one for planning permission in principle for the 3 houses. So in that layout plan, you'll see that just the first 3 houses, just with the greyed out roofs, those are the sites of the following application. So the site of this application are the 10 houses with the dark and light grey roofs in that view. And that's simply a general arrangement plan. And again, that was to highlight, you'll see the additional parking spaces forming part of the proposal in conjunction with the service road. These are the house types: 4-bed, 6-person house type, 3-bed, 5-person, 2-bed, 4-person, and the single-storey bungalow. That's a section through the site. And these are artists' impressions of the development provided by the applicant. So I think that the key points to note here are, in the concluding paragraphs to the report, there's an acceptance that there is some departure from the strict terms of the policy in this case. In particular, I think the application turns on the question of normally 1 or 2 houses in local plan policy GP 16. I think what you have to note in this case is that this is a very large building group. It's probably 40 to 50 houses. It's one of the largest small building groups, certainly in the Wigtown area. Another key factor is the planning history of the site in terms of its previous allocation as a housing site. For 10 houses. The other thing I think to note is that our view is that it doesn't fundamentally alter the character of the village. Clearly, it's a significant change, and that's accepted in the report. However, in terms of the existing character of the village and its linear nature alongside the main road, with this development being to some extent set behind it, I think the character of the village is largely retained. It's not dissimilar to other developments of similar villages elsewhere in Dumfries and Galloway and the Wigton area. When you take all those into account, together with the other material considerations such as strategic aims of the council, the demand for affordable housing, and national policy in terms of affordable housing policy, the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions.
Thank you. Thank you, Billy. Mr. Geddes, Councillor Geddes. Councillor, you're not plugged in yet.
Aye. So much for being technical. Paragraph 4.7 of the report, sir, Billy's already touched on it and he's summing up there, talking about the former Hornermacher's local plan, identifying the site as a potential housing site for an approximate capacity of 10 houses. The last sentence, Chairman, why the site was not carried over into the current Wigan local plan in 2006 is not known. I take it, sir, that the thrust of my question would be, I take it the responsibility for ensuring that was the case would have lain with the landowners at that time.
To some extent, yes. I had numerous discussions with my colleagues in development planning and strategic planning when this cropped up first, 2-3 years ago. And they sought to assist me by trying to find out whether there was any specific reason or, in terms of when the current local plan was evolving pre-2006, whether there had been any specific reasons given or conscious decision made to exclude that site. They weren't actually able to establish any clear reasons, and it almost appeared as if it had fallen through the net effectively. But certainly the landowner would have had an input into that and didn't bring it forward at that time, or didn't highlight the fact that it was currently allocated.
I'm grateful, sir. I think that might possibly have been due, of course, to family bereavement as well. I think that the elderly gentleman who owned the land had died, and whether his family were quite au fait with what required to be done. But anyway, that's in the past. I'm grateful for the clarification, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Islip.
Chair, it is on the sort of policy take on this. Now, my understanding of structure plan policy D4 was that it's usually limited to 1 or 2 sites infill. Now, that was what we used to work on when it was Nistdale, and to me this is out with that. I realise it has been in the local plan before. I don't know if you know whether the upcoming local development plan, whether this would be considered a suitable site or not, or whether that's been considered. I know it's not at draft stage yet, but it may have been indicative if it's been a sort of oversight, as has been said, that it was left out the last time, that it would be going back in, or is it a case of it's moved category from being a defined area to being a small building group?
I think your latter point is the true situation in terms of the forthcoming local development plan. However, it has to be emphasised that the application has to be considered in terms of the current development plan. So to that extent, it's not really relevant how it's going to be treated in the forthcoming local development plan.
Any other questions for Mr. Murray at this stage? No? Okay. We have some representatives. I have a Mr. Kelly down, but I understand Mr. Kelly doesn't want to speak or doesn't wish to speak. So I would call in Mr. Lucas, please. Mr. Lucas, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll endeavour to deal with the development plan aspects of the planning application, and my colleagues from Monreith and District Action Group will deal with other aspects. As the Planning Officer's report states, Monreith is defined in the 2006 Wigtown Local Plan as being potentially suitable for small-scale development as a small building group. The definition of small scale in that plan is normally 1 or 2 dwellings, not 13. Since 2006, there have been 3 new properties built, with a further 2 now consented. Paragraph 1.2 of the officer's report before you seeks to justify more than 1 or 2 on the basis that the site was identified as a site for approximately 10 houses in the former Whithorn and Mackers local plan. But that plan has been superseded, and I am advised that it cannot be considered as a material issue in this case. The current local plan definitely does not support approximately 10 new properties. Paragraph 4.7 of your officer's report clarifies this issue. There it is stated that it is not known why the suitability of the site for 10 houses was not carried forward into the 2006 local plan. Could it just be that it was later judged to be too many properties in a village of this size given its ongoing development? Paragraph 4.34 admits that elements of the proposal do not, strictly speaking, meet the terms of the stated policies in every detail, and admits that even 10 new dwellings will be a significant change to the village, and we're now looking at possibly 13 or maybe even 16. In a table prepared in 2010 showing the future availability of housing land in rural areas, the whole of Mid-Galloway had only a shortfall of 7 housing units. Monreith residents therefore ask why, given the development in the last 2 years, is Monreith being swamped by the scale of the applications under consideration. Finally, Chairman, there are 7 properties in the village currently for sale and have been for some time. Given the present financial climate, another issue of concern is that the 3 self-build plots which are contained in the following application will remain unsold, and eventually, because of plot sizes, revert to 6 units of social housing. I know that you've got to deal with the 2 applications separately, Chairman, but I do hope that committee will take this on board in their consideration, as I understand that it's not possible under planning law to prevent that happening. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Lucas? No? Okay, Mr. Lucas, you can take your seat. Thank you. My next speaker is Mr. Norfolk. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Norfolk.
Chairman, I should like to base my objections on the drainage and septic tank arrangements proposed for these developments. The existing septic tank was constructed in the early 1950s at a time when there were fewer people in the village and the needs for water and drainage, etc., were considerably less than they are today. There are now more houses, and the caravan park has now over 50 large units. I've recently received a correspondence from Scottish Water which states categorically that the tank, in its present form, has 0 extra capacity. The proposed development will add approximately 50 more residents to the already fully loaded system. The village drainage system is designed at present to channel all sewage water into the septic tank and surface rainwater to the main drains. These then also feed into the settlement tank. The new development will increase the amount of surface water entering the drains, as it will no longer be able to soak away naturally into the ground as it does in the field at present. DGHP proposals to cope with the site surface water are via a SUDS drainage network. Site water drains will be channeled into 2 large underground storage pipes. These pipes are designed to fill and then feed back into the village drainage system via a hydro brake system. This would then pass onto the settlement tank, meaning that all the water and sewage from the proposed development will eventually end up in the septic tank. There appears to be no means of cleaning out the SUD system should the pipes become silted up. This would render it ineffective. The settlement tank itself overflows into Monreith Burn and then down to the seashore. The tank overflow is only some 30 metres from the nearest property on Mill Lane, and the burn then flows past 5 more properties before reaching the sea. In the event of the tank not being able to cope, water will flush raw sewage from the tank and pollute the burn and the seashore. This has a clear health and safety impact on residents and the houses on Mill Lane, as well as bathers and holidaymakers on the beach. Farmland to the north of the proposed development slopes down towards the site and is at present drained by an open ditch. This slopes to the west and is then piped away to the burn, crossing the grounds of Westview Care Home, whose owner is not happy at all about any further work being done to his property. This drain frequently becomes overgrown and blocked, and in times of heavy rain, some of the lower lying properties become flooded. At present, the existing drainage system is unable to cope with the heavy rain. It is flooded at the moment, as a matter of interest.
You have 30 seconds, sir.
My point here is that the current mains drainage network and sewage system are old and already at full capacity. Further developments in the area must increase the risk of flooding and subsequent water pollution. Should these developments be given approval by this committee, there will be a need and a proviso that existing wastewater and sewage systems be completely overhauled and reworked and increased in their capacity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The timing is just about perfect. You had 3 seconds left. Any questions for the gentleman? Members? No? Thank you very much, sir. You can take your seat. Now have Mr. Shuttleworth, please. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Shuttleworth.
Monreith was once described as not even a village, just a collection of houses. This was by a member of staff of the Dumfries and Galloway Small Communities Housing Trust, and he was right. Monreith has nothing to offer but houses. There is a small hall, but even that does not belong to the community, as it is owned by Monreith Estate and leased to a carpet bowling club who allow us to use it out with the indoor bowling season, which runs from October to March. So we have nowhere for meetings in the winter. When 3 years ago, a housing needs survey for Monreith was proposed by the Dumfries and Galloway Small Communities Housing Trust, the residents agreed to take part, little realising that the survey would eventually be carried out among the wider Port William Community Council district, which covers an area considerably beyond Monreith. How anybody living beyond the confines of Monreith could comment on the housing needs of the village is beyond me. I wouldn't dream of taking part in a survey of, say, Mockram's needs, it being 4 miles away. However, what became clear was that the survey was being carried out to justify the building of houses in Monreith. One wonders what would happen had we refused to take part in this survey. And any pretence that the residents would be continued to be consulted on the proposals was blown out of the window 18 months ago, when, unbeknown to us, a funding application was made to the Council and the Scottish Government. The result is a proposed mini estate, and one out of keeping with the character and environment of a quiet Maccas village, which is not equipped to deal with the population explosion of the size envisaged. These houses are not for the people of Monreith. So much for consultation. The statement supporting the application refers to the estate of the late owner of the site, wishing to see the land used for the benefit of the wider community. So not Monreith then. So where will our new neighbours come from, should the application be approved? All our attempts to find out the answer to that question were met with obfuscation and rhetoric. At the beginning of this saga, we were told that the houses would be for local people via a local letting policy. But the local people already had houses, so it wouldn't be them. Folk from Port William, houses in a new DGHP scheme there will be released for occupation soon.
30 seconds, Mr. Shuttleworth.
So it won't be them. Mockram, Elrig, Waphill, I think not. So folk from further afield will be allocated a house in a village without any of the social amenities they are probably used for taking for granted. Monreith is a neat little place with a row of cottages on the main road, the original village, being complemented by the gradual addition of more modern properties. However, the application now before you will seriously undermine the symmetry and pleasing aspect of the existing layout by throwing a bunch of not particularly attractive houses into its midst.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Any questions from Mr. Shuttleworth? No? Okay, thank you. You can take your seat. We now have Mr. Chalmers and Mr. Shirazi from the applicants. If you could come forward. You have 3 minutes between you, if you both want to speak. Mr. Shirazi is going to do the talking.
Just for the
Could you switch? Aye, that's okay. When you go, James, switch it on. Press the speak button. Okay, you've 3 minutes, Mr. Shirazi.
Thank you, Chair. I think in situations like this, whenever we start to look at a project, we always start at demand. And I think there's been a few questions from the objectors about why we're building in Monreith. And I'd have to say, we've only got 5 houses there. There's been very little turnover over the last few years. Just over the last year, we've had 25 applications for those houses. In the larger Machers area, we've had over 200 applications just in the last year. So the demand is high. And had that demand not be high, we would not be interested in developing in Monreith. Some of the tenants on our waiting lists have been on our waiting list for over 20 years now without proper good quality housing. The proposals are only for 10 houses and they're to match our demand profile. And again, we've got some elderly people on that where we've provided 2 bungalows in the programme. This is also one of the priorities in the council's SHIP programme. So this has been through the government and through the council's strategic priorities. It's only 10 houses. We haven't provided any flats. The demand in the area is all for front and back door houses, and we've provided 10 semi-detached properties. We will be providing a local lettings initiative, which will give preference to local people. We carried out a small survey of the people on our waiting list, the 200 people, and over 90% of them had a local connection. So in terms of who would be getting the houses, it would come from the local people. In terms of funding, the project will cost some £1.5 million, and the funding has been secured for that, 40% from the Scottish Government and 60% from DGHP. We have carried out, over the last 2 to 3 years, extensive community consultation. We've met with the local community 3 or 4 times, and we've taken on a lot of the feedback that they have given us to such an extent where we withdrew our original planning application, we redesigned it and reduced the scale of the houses. Just to confirm that this isn't just for social housing, out of the 10 houses, we've got 6 social houses and we've got 4 what's called mid-market rents. The mid-market rents, the way you qualify for it is you have to have a job. So it's not our normal waiting list applications. We're a partner with the Small Communities Housing Trust, who have a local rural burden. Jamie, I'm not trying to steal your thunder, but I'll just give you some highlights of the 3 houses that are for self-build.
You've half a minute, Mr.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll move on. We'll be creating in the region of 25 to 30 jobs. In terms of, it'll be high quality houses, 15% over the minimum standards. Meets all the standards for varying needs for disabled people. And in terms of energy efficiency, we have microgeneration and high levels of energy efficiency in the houses.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Dryborough.
Mr. Shirazi, you say this was an amended proposal. How many houses were in the original proposal? And one of the issues that was raised by the objectors, of course, was the drainage side of things. Are you suggesting that within this proposal there will be an improvement to drainage in that particular area?
Thank you, Councillor Dryborough. I've invited Bob to join me. In terms of technical questions, I think best leave it to somebody who knows what they're talking about. In terms of the application and the community consultation process, we met over 3 or 4 times in the local community hall, and it was the scale of the buildings that were originally the problem, that we were proposing 2-storey houses. And with consultation with planning and the local community, we decided to withdraw the original application and reduce the size of houses to more in character with the village, which is 1.5-storey. And in terms of the
drainage originally was an open suds arrangement, which was of concern to the local community, and we changed that to an underground system, which was considered safer and didn't impinge on the amenity of the play area.
It should also be confirmed that the West of Scotland Water have said that they will adopt our proposals at the end of the project.
Okay, Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, Chairman. Mr. Shirazi alluded to the fact that these proposals had already been found a room or a space, call it what you will, in the Council's SHIP Strategic Housing Investment Programme. I trust that he would accept that while to that extent the Council have committed themselves to the proposal or a proposed development there, he would accept entirely, Chairman, that this is a wholly separate process and that there's no guarantee that this application today would be approved as a result of prior inclusion in such a programme.
I accept that, Councillor Geddes.
Councillor Dempster.
Just two questions. The local letting policy that you referred to, and if you're successful, you intend to implement, what radius does that take applicants from? And the other question is, given the profile of your houses, I presume they'd be brought forward in terms of 3-bedroom, 2-bed, that'd be brought forward some time ago. Have you now, are you now satisfied to continue with that arrangement, given the bedroom tax that's being talked about now, or the benefits arrangement, where I would imagine some larger amount of folk looking for a single bedroom because of their personal circumstances?
In terms of demand, I think just with the amount of people that are in the area, and in terms of demand, I would identify a 5-mile radius from the village. We have enough to fill those, plenty of people on our waiting list to fill those houses, and those houses are appropriate to our waiting list applications. So I'm satisfied that there's no major issues with the bedroom tax, with the social reform that's going on. And in terms of the types of houses and layouts, I think we've gone for a fairly small scale, low density. There's no flats involved in the properties. There was very little demand for that type of property in the area. So I think we're quite happy that what we have on our waiting lists reflects well on the proposals.
Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Shirazi, you said in your reason for picking this site was demand. You cited 20 applications for this area, yet you cited 200 within the Machars. Why this site specifically, which is not in a local plan? And I'm sure somewhere in the Machars there will be sites within the local plan, as 90% of your applications are not for this site.
Oh, right. In terms of demand, for that local village, it was 25. We've had 25 applications just in the last year. Over the last few years, we've had many more than that. And the latent information we get is many people haven't applied for Monreith because they just don't think they'll get a house. In terms of the Machars area, what I said was a 5-mile radius. We've had in the region of 200 applications. And this was the biggest conurbation, or the biggest village, sorry, I should say, in that radius. So that's why we chose this one.
Surely Port William's a bit bigger. Only 2 miles away.
Thank you, Chairman. We are providing houses in Port William. Port William was the other big conurbation in the area. And we're currently providing 14 houses for that area. And again, we've been inundated with applications for those houses.
Councillor Maitland.
There's clearly a concern, Chairman, about the designs of these houses that was expressed by the representatives. And I wonder if we could possibly have an explanation of why these particular designs have been chosen.
Designed in terms of the size of the houses, what they look like. Okay, I'll refer to our architect.
They originally were 2-storey houses, but in fact, Bill, if you want to show the artist's impression, they were reduced so that they would, the roof lines would tie in more with the existing houses beside them. And they would step down to single story, so they would tie in better with the front street. So it tied in so that 1.5 story and single story mix met the housing requirement which it was obliged to meet, and also reduced the apparent height as much as possible.
And the windows and the porch detailing, this sort of thing, which is, you know, of interest to people who live in a village.
Yes, indeed. This was all developed in consultation with the planning department. All the components we're using are high quality because we're going for a 60-year life of low maintenance. So, for example, the render, for example, we now use silicon-based render, so it washes clear. So we don't have this problem that most houses have that have to become grubby after 6 months. We're using the latest generation of secure by design insulated doors, double glazed windows, timber glazed windows. We're using zinc detailing and lead appearance detailing to try and tie into a village of this nature, to try and be as sympathetic as possible, and slate effect roofs. We're also using a large landscape belt, as you can see, to try and soften the impact between the houses and the front street. So we've actually added in a considerable amount of landscaping, which we would not normally do. However, the site is also to full secure by design standards, and the police are happy with the standards we've provided.
Okay. Any other questions, Councillor Geddes?
Yes, just in the back of the the landscape area has presumably discussions already taken place, about the type of planting that would take place there. Could we perhaps have details of that, Chairman, through you, sir?
Yes, there's a full landscaping scheme submitted to the planning department, and we will be. It's 4 rows of trees. I won't give all the Latin names, but 4 rows of trees in bands, and we're quite happy in specimen trees in each corner as well. And the arrangement of the trees are following advice from suitable landscape architects for trees which would be suitable for this coastal area.
Okay. Any further questions for the applicants? No, and thank you very much, gentlemen. You can take your seat. Now in session, folks. Councillor Geddes.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, sir, I would pay tribute to to the case officer for the quality of the report that he's produced here. It's a balanced report. It's a detailed report. It doesn't attempt to gild the lily. It flags up, in fact, that there are areas where, strictly speaking, it maybe not, the proposals don't lie on all fours with the current plan, etc. And that's precisely, in my view, as it should be. But to me, Chairman, if you go to the part of the report, or the conclusion of the report, it makes it quite clear, and it encapsulates it quite nicely as to why, in fact, the report has reached the conclusions that it has. And in these circumstances, sir, I have no compunction in suggesting, in fact, that this application be granted on the basis of the terms and conditions set out in the report, and I would move accordingly.
Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with everything Alistair actually says here. I mean, we've heard during the objectives discussion about how many homes were up for sale. In actual fact, this development may actually keep the village alive. We're bringing families into that particular area. We want people to come to Dumfries and Galloway, and we need good quality housing for them to actually come to. And as the applicant actually says, there's going to be mid-rent, so therefore people are actually going to be in work when they get this particular thing. So that's going to add value to the village itself. So therefore I've got absolutely no problem in seconding Alistair if it was a motion to actually go with the recommendations.
Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just going to endorse that as well. And from experience as a small settlement in my ward with 1 DGHP housing, I've had to remove it from the allocation system because there's so much demand for a property in that particular location. So whilst large settlements have their place to play in Dumfries and Galloway, I think we should be developing on a limited basis small communities to allow people to live where they actually want to. And I'm happy to support the application as well.
Councillor Maitland.
I was actually, when I read this, I was pleasantly surprised at the layout. I think it's reasonably varied, and I think also there's been some attempt to both vary how the layout is put with respect to the roads and also the different designs of the buildings. And because you've got that variety, it's reasonably pleasing to look at. What I am concerned about is the detail, exactly what members were talking about earlier. What you don't want to do is create what looks like a pleasing whole there, and then with poor quality lighting and unthought through fencing arrangements, you actually do away with the harmony of the arrangements that you've got. So I want to be absolutely certain that we don't find the place suddenly fixed up with quite high fences between the houses and very obtrusive lighting, because that will not enhance this in terms of a good quality and rural type development. So I think people should take very careful cognizance of the sort of place this is. It's not a suburban area, it's a rural village on the edge of the coast, and we want to enhance it, not make a mistake out of it.
Okay. Anyone else wish to say anything? Councillor Ogilvie.
Just on the back of Councillor Maitland, there was a small village just outside Annandale that doesn't have street lights. This was a main issue for objection. However, at the time we were given advice that the standards have changed since these wee villages. We've got to put in lights for security reasons now. I've just asked the planning officer, taking on Jane's view, which is right a wee bit, because that'll be seen from the offshore as well, I'd imagine. If the amenity lighting or the street lighting can be done in such a way that it doesn't impact on the character. I know we've got to have it, but is there a way of mitigating against it?
I would address members to condition 13 on page 94, because that's exactly what this is looking at, is to get details of how the lighting would proceed. Obviously, the case officers here today has heard what members' view is, and I'm sure he will ensure that the lighting is appropriate in the context.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, I suppose when you look at it first from a policy perspective, you think, how's this going to get through? But I actually think this is a sort of sensible way of taking this forward. It's an extension to the village. It does tie in with the sort of the rest of it, it's at Medan's, the back. And I think it's quite a good opportunity. I might speak to the officer afterwards to get the wording in case there's any that come through that I want to support for other bits that might not get it.
Councillor Geddes.
It was just to say, sir, on the back of the concerns, and perfectly understandable and indeed legitimate concerns that have been expressed about lighting. You and I have both got experience of the novel system of lighting that was put in Glentroe Village in relation to the Dark Skies Park. Can I suggest perhaps that might be commended both to the applicants and to the planning officers in Mid-Galloway to ensure, in fact, that if possible and if appropriate, that can be replicated, sir, because it's extremely effective in the Glentroe context. I think you would agree.
Totally agree with you. One of you. Don't fight about it.
Chair, I was just going to say, obviously, the Dark Sky Park initiative has been a big success, both for residents of Dumfries and Galloway and also generating tourist income too, and that's quite high up our agenda now. In terms of street lighting, obviously, you're looking at a layout that, if it was approved today, would be subject to road construction consent. And I know from experience that the roads officers are now looking at more sensitive lighting solutions than your standard kind of orange sodium lights that aren't really, designed in a way to prevent upward light spillage. So certainly, I mean, depending on your decision today, if you're minded to approve it, we could certainly engage in a dialogue with the relevant roads lighting engineers to try and ensure that there's an appropriate kind of standard of lighting that doesn't cause unnecessary light pollution.
Okay. We have a motion to approve. Anyone otherwise minded? No. Carol.
Thank you. Can I, just for clarity, confirm that members are happy with the condition 13 as detailed, or whether you're looking for anything more specific in respect of your approval decision?
To answer the question, I thought we've got assurance from the plan officer that they would go into dialogue. So I'm quite happy to leave it to the officers and the streets people, lighting people to come up with the solution.
Thank you then. On that basis then I confirm that the decision of the committee is to approve the application with conditions as detailed in the report.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is item 8, and it's erection of 3 1.5-storey dwelling houses at St Medan's, Monreith. Mr Murray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think members will have already appreciated that there are many similarities between this report and the preceding one. This is for planning permission in principle for 3 self-built plots that will be the first 3 plots as you leave the existing housing at St Medan's before you come into the development of the 10 houses that you've just discussed. So the slides are virtually identical. So I'll just take you through them again. You're familiar with them already. It's the approach to the site, the amenity space and play area. All of the drainage will be incorporated with the drainage that's in the 10-house proposal just approved. Again, the site from the turning head, the site itself, play area, and looking back down the access road. Again, the aerial view. The layout, and in that layout, the 3 plots you're now considering are the 3 buff-coloured ones at the left of that layout. So these will be the 3 self-built plots under the auspices of the Dumfries and Galloway Small Communities Housing Trust. You will note that there's a condition recommended in the report to ensure that these houses are only single-storey or storey-and-a-half, so there's no opportunity to go beyond that. That's to try and maintain the link with the existing houses at St Medan's, and perhaps in some way make the whole development merge better between the existing houses, which, by virtue of their age and style, are slightly more compact than the houses now proposed. So effectively you would have those smaller, older, compact houses. You'd have the 3 self-build plots at single or storey-and-a-half, and then you'd have the 10 slightly larger ones in the main body of the development. And again, the artist's impression, 3 houses subject to this report would be the first 2 as you leave the red roofed area, and then the one on the right, the second one on the right. So the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions.
Councillor Islip.
Bit of a daft laddie question. Why is it we're determining the earlier application after the latter one? If you take the numbers, 155 would come in first, and it would seem that you should have had the 3 houses and then added on, rather than do the one at the end and then come back to the 3.
I think it was done in that way because the fundamental issue was the matter of principle in terms of GP16 and the normally 1 or 2 houses. And that was more an issue in the 10-house report, so I felt it better to put forward the policy arguments under the larger application first before we moved on to the 3-house one.
Any other questions for Mr Murray? Councillor Maitland.
Yes, I'm sorry, I picked through this and I've forgotten whether I found the answer, which is how do we stop the possibility of a kind of building site, a permanent building site, being at the entrance to the the rented and the social housing? How is that managed in case there isn't demand in the first, say, year or 2, and you have this basic derelict site?
We could not manage it, as you put it, to compel someone to develop these plots. I think the only thing we could do, we would have powers to ensure that these plots, if undeveloped, were properly maintained, so that they wouldn't be detrimental to the amenity. They would simply be grassed areas, effectively.
Councillor Hislop.
Just following up on that, because I've had a case in my ward whereby there was a planning application. It's ended up into self-builds, I think, and it's not that it's untidy, but there's quarter cabins and everything, and this is going to be a permanent feature for the next, if you go by the rate of build, next 14 years. Now, I think Councillor Maitland has a point in this. How do we make sure that these 3 houses are completed in a reasonable time?
But the kind of problem you're describing in terms of a permanent building site or porta cabins only occurs once the development starts. You know, until such time as the development starts, these are just 3 green plots. It just remains as it is at the moment.
Chair, if you put the first one in and then you put your porta cabin in the next one, because that's what's happened in the Cullen site, whereby because it's not actually on the site, it's adjacent to the site, you're allowed to do that. So you could be looking at, when you're building out the social housing, all the porta cabins on the next site, and then when you build the first one, you have something on one of the other sites. So I think you have to look at that.
Point of order, Chair. We know we're speculating. We better listen to the applicant first. Now we can always discuss that at a later date. Because in reality, they could park touring caravans there, they could park motor vehicles there, they could be horse boxes, worse looking than what's being discussed. But we're preempting what's maybe coming just now.
Okay. No other legitimate questions for the officer? We'll call. Again, I have Mr. Kelly down to speak. We understand he doesn't want to speak. So, Mr. Lucas, please. Mr. Lucas, you have 3 minutes again.
Just very briefly, we're not going to go through all the presentations which we previously have gone through. I'm sure you'll be relieved to hear that. But just to reiterate, really, our concern that the 3 self-build plots will stay as self-build plots for a long time, and our real fear is that they, because of the size of the plots, double the size of the social housing plots, that they will eventually revert to 6 units of social housing. And I would ask members to bear that in mind, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Lucas? No? Okay, thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Norfolk.
Mr. Chairman, I've got nothing to add from my previous presentation regarding the drainage. It all applies to the same site. I'm maintaining that the system as it stands at the moment is old and as undersized. It's already at 0 capacity, spare capacity, and any development on that site needs to expand the drainage and the septic tank arrangements. So nothing to add really from my previous presentation.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for gentlemen? No? Okay, sir, you can take your seat. And Mr. Shuttleworth, please. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Shuttleworth.
My only statement really is to point out that previously regarding the 10 houses was my concern was with the facilities available for the additional 10 families, 50 people. Now we're going to get another three dwelling with more families. There are no social amenities whatsoever. And could somebody tell me how these people are going to be welcome to the village and how they're going to fit in? There isn't a hall suitable, there isn't a shop. We have a post box, a telephone box, and that's the lot. Social cohesion, let's go out of the window, I'm afraid.
Okay, sir. Any questions for the gentleman? No? Okay, thank you, sir. You can take your seat. Now, Mr. Chalmers and Mr. Dent has asked to speak, and Mr. Chalmers is kindly is willing to let him speak part of his presentation. So, Mr. Dent, you have 3 minutes.
I'd just like to address some of the concerns that have been raised already. Firstly, the issue that members asked about how the site would get developed. We would put a condition on sale that placing a time limit on whoever purchased the properties to develop within 2 years of purchase, to complete development within 2 years of purchase. We would also go through a very long process to make sure that self-builders were fully aware of all the blocks and hindrances in the way and had finance in place before they were permitted to purchase the site. The idea of the houses not being developed and then being turned into a further 6 plots instead of 3, well, I can't totally discount the possibility that the house plots may not sell. we do have quite a large level of interest in them, I should add. But we would certainly not be keen on causing further problems in the village, and in any way, this would have to come back to the planning committee for further consideration. I don't think there's space within those plots to turn them into semi-detached plots rather than single detached plots. So the idea of getting 6 out of 3, I don't think is really feasible. Another important feature of these houses is that when they are sold, or the house plots when they're sold at cost price. That we make no profit from this at all. And they will be subject to a rural housing burden, which means that they must be offered back to the trust at every subsequent opportunity, at every subsequent sale, at a discounted percentage that allows for the discount that was prevented in the first place. So these houses remain houses that are below market value and targeted at local people in perpetuity. And I think that's a very important consideration. On the drainage issue, currently the flooding issues that may be occurring at the moment are largely as a result of poorly maintained drains outside of the site. But we've undertaken with DGHP to address that issue. Any other surface water running across the site that may be causing the flooding will be put into the conventional drainage system, where currently it's ending up anyway. This would just slow the flows in the underground pipes would slow the flows down, and to my knowledge, it is totally possible to maintain and clear these pipes should they silt up. I suspect the Scottish Water would not have adopted them or offered to adopt them had that been the case.
You've half a minute, Mr. Dent.
Other than that, basically, we have discovered considerable demand in this area. We conducted a survey that found that there was demand for both rented housing and for housing, owner-occupier housing. Both applications have been put together in a quite a cohesive way to really match, in a very nuanced way, local demand. It is very much about housing for local people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Geddes.
Yes, sir. Deputy, are you convinced, and can you give us a clear assurance, Mr. Dent, that your proposals, as it were, for ensuring that the work will be carried out within finite and completed, more importantly, within finite timescales, that plus the implementation of a rural burden referred to in paragraph 1.10 of the report, that these are enforceable at law and will in fact provide you with teeth, as it were, to avoid the perfectly legitimate and understandable concerns that the last thing you want to see in that part of an attractive village, in fact, is 3 plots, as it were, finishing up little short of a wilderness. Can we have your assurance that this has been checked out from a legal perspective and that these proposals are implementable and enforceable?
Yes, I can give assurance on those points. This particular method of developing property has been done in the Highlands by our Highland equivalent, the Highland Small Communities Housing Trust, for some 12 years now. And this is exactly the same methodology that they use, and they have had no problems, even in the last few years of difficulties of obtaining finance. It's an established method, and it does stand up.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, my question was answered, and I've got reassurance from the answer that was given.
Councillor Dryborough. Okay, any further questions for Mr. Dent? No? Okay, Mr. Dent, you can take your seat.
Thank you very much.
We're in debate, ladies and gentlemen. Councillor Geddes.
Can I move so that the application be granted on the basis of the conditions as detailed in the report? I won't embarrass Mr. Murray for a second time by paying compliment to his ability as a report writer.
We don't want him to get big-headed. Councillor McKee.
Well, a bit of pea going on that side of the table now, isn't it? It's just a couple of things. I've no objection. In fact, I'd second Councillor Geddes. But on 414, it talks about worst-case scenario where surface water flows did cause problems for neighbouring properties. This would be a matter to be addressed by a developer. Should we have put that in as a condition to ensure that that is what happens? And the other thing I wanted to raise, asked a question on was, prior to these being sold, somebody said about them getting rough vegetation and whatnot. Should we put in a condition that these sites are maintained, kept tidy until such times as they're sold, and even when they're sold, that should be done by the owner of the site, the purchaser of the site anyway.
In terms of the drainage issue, I think what I was trying to highlight in 414 was that effectively, when I said it was a matter for the developer, it would be a civil matter for the developer for Dumfries and Galloway Housing Partnership, effectively. So it would not be appropriate to try and apply a planning condition to cover that in the future, because that would entirely be a civil matter. In the same way as if your house caused flooding to your neighbour, it would be a matter for you to deal with if you were responsible for it. In terms of the second point, again, I don't think it would be legitimate to put a planning condition on this planning permission in principle approval if it indeed it is approved, because in a way it would be unnecessary. We have powers in place. If the site became unacceptable in amenity terms, we could use those powers to ensure that the landowner kept them in a suitable condition to protect the amenity of the area. So therefore, the answer to your question on that is no, it would not be appropriate to apply a planning condition to try and address that in this case.
I'll let him off this time. Councillor Geddes thinks he's a good boy, so let him off.
He doesn't always say that, I can tell you. To go back to Councillor Hislop's question earlier on, I mean, we have a couple of sites in not too distant from there, one in Kirkinner and one in Sorby, which have caused a lot of concern about the state of those sites have been allowed to get into during the period. What guarantees have we got that we can sort that out, or not let that happen in this case?
Well, I think the main reassurance comes from Mr. Dent in terms of their conditions requiring completion within 2 years. I wouldn't like to make comparisons with the two sites you've referred to, because there are particular issues there, such as inability to identify who an owner is. And I don't think there's any suggestion that those circumstances would occur here. And in terms of Councillor Hislop's question, you know, you've also got to be aware that this is a separate development to the 10-house development. So you couldn't have, you know, you might have porta cabins on this land while the 10-house development's going ahead, but whenever it's finished, they would have to go, because these three plots, this is, first of all, this is planning permission in principle, so there would have to be a further application for each plot. So the permitted development rights in terms of porta cabins or huts or things like that would only apply to the specific permission for an individual plot. So therefore, again, once that plot was finished, they would all have to go, because it would always be related to the individual planning permission. So I hope that gives you some reassurance in that regard.
Okay, we have a motion. Anyone otherwise minded? No. Okay, Carol.
Thank you. Confirm then the application has been approved with the conditions as detailed in the report.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is upgrading and refurbishment of areas within the park, Dock Park, including upgrading of car park area, replacement of children's play area, refurbishment of memorials and park furniture, improvements to landscape setting, creation of entrance gateways at north and south entrances, and restoration of bandstand at Dock Park. Councillor McCaughey.
A wee query in this one. If you look at who the applicant is, Dumfries and Galloway Council, as part of the Common Good Fund. The Common Good Fund, of course, is administered by the council, but that was delegated to the Annandale Area Committee, which then delegated it to a Common Good Fund Committee. To the best of my knowledge, this has never been before that particular committee, so how can an application be made in its name? I've got a slight worry about this one. I mean, there's other things contained within the report I would go into, but I think I really need an answer on this.
You're causing some consternation up here, Tom. Who's going to answer that question?
I would, but I suspect it's worded the way it is because the committee will have no legal persona and therefore no ability to make such applications. The council would have to do it as the person administering the Common Good Fund.
But as far as I'm aware, the Common Good Fund Subcommittee and Annandale District Area Committee haven't made any hard and fast decisions on this. I think there's been a seminar on the matter. It's been subject to discussion, but I don't think they've actually formally said this is what we're going to go for.
All I can advise is that this is an application which has been submitted to us and we've just had to deal with it. The background to it, I'm afraid, I'm not party to.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, Tom might be right that the actual proposal hasn't been before, but the idea of upgrading the actual park has came to the area committee prior to the formation of the Common Good subcommittee. And the area committee did discuss, putting a bid in to upgrade the park.
So?
Now, the problem I've got, did it actually come to a formal meeting of the area committee? Or was it a seminar? I remember sitting in here about a year ago and we got a presentation. I don't think that was a decision-making body, and it certainly didn't give the impression that we were making a decision on behalf of the common good. Because if we did, there were people present in part of that meeting who are not members of the common good.
Thank you. I just reiterate the advice that's given. The application is before members. It's for you, therefore, to approve or refuse. The point that you make is material in respect of who has the powers to implement if you decide to approve.
Councillor Dempsey.
I think the council as a whole have supported this, Chair. And as Carol was saying, we'll make the decision anyway, and that can be dealt with at a later date. The council has made a decision to progress this as part of the development of Dumfries and the White Sands. So we should consider it today. We should deal with it and have the bun fight later on about who put it in that context for us to be presented to us. But that shouldn't alter the decision and the consideration we give today.
Councillor Maitland. Right. So, I think the feeling is we proceed. Who's dealing with this?
The case officer for this one is Lynn Hunter, but Lynn is now on maternity leave, so I'll take on this one. There must be something in the water, yes. Just running through the slides, this is the entrance for vehicles just off St Michael's Bridge Road, and the site, as you'll see, is beside the River Nith. This is the car parking area within the site, and you'll see that there's also an entrance in existence at the moment for the medical centre. That would be unaffected by this proposal. There's a line of almost ecclesiastical style arches that run down there, which as the pedestrian entrance into the park. And there's going to be proposal for 2 pillars sitting just, sandstone pillars just at the entrance there. Children's play park, as part of this proposal, would actually be removed and relocated within the park. You can also just see at the right-hand side there is what's known as the Titanic Memorial. And the play park would move further towards the town side, be built around an existing maze. This is the bandstand, which is a Category B listed building, although it is, as you can see from the photo, seen rather better days. And part of the proposal is obviously to refurbish that. At the southern end of the park, there's another pedestrian entrance point, and again, 2 sandstone pillars would be proposed there. So this shows the context of the site. As you can see, it's right by the river, quite central in Dumfries. And this is the overview of the revised car park. There would be a sandstone wall erected at the far left-hand side, along with the St Michael's Bridge Road. You can just make out on that plan there's a number of sort of swirly loops which are beside the road. That's the tracking to show that HGVs and the like can get in and out of the revised car parking area in forward gear, which is what roads engineers wanted proof of. So there is tracking there to demonstrate it can be achieved. And you've also got, you can see the entrance into the medical centre there. This would be the new wall that would be erected onto St Michael's Bridge Road, sandstone wall with railing detail. And this shows the overall context of the park and gives specific details of the sandstone pillars, which, from memory, are about 2.2 metres high. This shows there's a square in the centre of the slide. That's the existing children's play park. The new play park would be located further to the north and be built around the existing maze. We don't have details at the moment for exactly what the new play park facilities would be, because it is intended to be a design and build exercise. However, condition 6 in the recommended conditions would actually address that we do need to see details of exactly what will be going in, and to ensure that it's done timely and all the other materials aren't removed and not put back. This is the bandstand. We don't have details precisely enough, in our opinion, to give comfort to know exactly how this listed building would be restored. There's fairly indicative plans at the moment. So conditions 1, 2, and 3 require submission of precise details so we know exactly what's going to be going in. And finally, there's a viewpoint to the river known as Kelly's Viewpoint, which would be formed in the riverbank. But subject to the conditions in the report, the application is recommended for approval. I should also add as well, we do now have a listed building consent application for the bandstand as well, which was mentioned in the report that hadn't yet been submitted.
Any questions for Mr. Sutty? Councillor McCaughey?
I really think we need to put some safeguards in there. If you go back to one of the first photographs, showed the arches. Now, I know that was discussed at the meeting we had with the Annandale Area Committee. Yeah, that is one of the only 3 things surviving from the region's input to the Glasgow Garden Festival in 1986. It's supposed to be a representation of the arches at Sweetheart Abbey. And the District Council, in its wisdom, planted them down there. Now, if that's going to be redeveloped, these must be placed somewhere else in Dumfries because of that historical significance. I think the only other things remaining from the Glasgow Garden Festival, there's a sandstone plaque in the close in the courtyard at the Globe Inn, and there's a representation of the Ruffle Cross at the Gracefield Museum. But that's one of the few surviving things from there. Other points been made to me by a number of people. There are a lot of benches in that park there. Go back to when the park was originally put in place way back in the 1800s. They're solid cast iron, and again, wish them to be retained. We go back with the history of the park. And the third thing is the Rood Fair, because you've got to bear in mind that the fair has got a greater history in Dumfries than almost anywhere else in Scotland. It's the first fair in Scotland, and it's the last fair in Scotland. The fairs in Scotland start in Dumfries and they finish in Dumfries, coming here for hundreds of years, long before the motor car. And I notice it is mentioned in the report on page 116. Now, I know for a fact, because I know the Showman's Guild, nobody's spoken to the Showman's Guild about this, because they do have rights over part of that land. So I suggest before they go ahead with this car park, and perhaps putting in barriers that could prevent the fair being there, that they're instructed to speak with the Showman's Guild. I'll be happy to give them a number to contact to speak with. But I think we've got to protect some of the stuff that has got historical significance to Dumfries, and I certainly want these built into the recommendation. The seats, the arches, and the Rood's Fair right to be there, because I think that is important. What I'm surprised about is the fact they're cutting down the capacity, trying to attract more folk there, and they're cutting down the capacity of the car park. And maybe that's something that needs to be looked at, cutting down from 91 spaces to 76 spaces, just for a wee bit of aesthetic effect. So really, if they did away with this sort of barrier they're proposing within the car park, that might help and get a few more car parking spaces in as well.
Mr. Sutty?
If I can just put Councillor McCaughey's mind at rest, the plans don't show these as being removed. The arches are shown as still remaining. So they wouldn't be coming out to the best of my knowledge. So you won't be able to make it out because I was having to squint at the plans themselves. But that plan there, if you can just see there's dots marked where they are. So they're shown as being retained on this plan here. Sorry, I don't have a pointer, but if you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trees running along the bottom of the parking space, and then you've got another dotted tree, and then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think there's dots That's the arches that are sitting along there, so they're shown as remaining. They're still on that plan, they're not coming out, to the best of my knowledge.
Any further questions for Mr. Sutty? We're in debate. Or is this a question? We're in debate, Rodney.
I thought this was a good news story, but I thought, could we not get a bid into the lottery and get some development in Annan, but seemingly not.
Anybody else got any points to make? The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. Anyone otherwise minded? Agreed. Okay.
Thank you. In respect then to Dock Park, Dumfries, the planning application has been approved, subject to conditions.
Next item on the agenda is also Dock Park, and it's alterations to Pavilion, including construction of pitched roof over existing flat roof, formation of access ramp on west elevation, formation of new doorways and replacement windows at Dock Park Pavilion, Dock Park, Dumfries. Mr. Sutty, it'll be you again.
Yes, and I suspect our batteries have run out again. Robert, would you be good enough to move the slides on for me? Oh, hang on, it's moving. It's woken up. Right, this is a related application, but nonetheless submitted as a freestanding one. The pavilion, as you can see, again, has probably seen better days. The right-hand side of the photo there has got a flat roof. The main part on the left is a more traditional slated roof. Looking at it from the other side, you can again see the flat roof and the pitched roof difference. So that's where it sits within the park. That's existing elevations, and what they're proposing to do is actually add a pitched roof to it. The building isn't listed, but nonetheless I think this is a considerable improvement in terms of its physical appearance and materials. So the recommendation is to approve.
Any questions for Mr. Sutty? We're in debate, we're agreed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Then confirm that the Dock Park Pavilion, the committee have approved the application subject to conditions as detailed in the report. Application approved.
Okay, application number 11, demolition of toilet block, public toilet block, and erection of annex to hall incorporating ground floor, information desk, office, shop, cafe, kitchen and servery, toilets, storage areas, part first floor office and store, installation of solar panels and 2 air source heat pumps, formation of outside seating area at St Ninian's Hall, Isle of Whithorn. Mr. Murray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a proposal to extend and upgrade an existing well-used village hall in the Isle of Whithorn. This is the existing hall. It shows the small toilet block on the right that's to be demolished, and toilet facilities will thereafter be provided within the extended hall. That's a view of the site from the main road in Isle of Whithorn. Shows the small car park, public car park fronting the site there. Sorry? Well, since you mention it, members, I wasn't going to refer to this, but I will do so because you've given me the opportunity. This was us on a day's leave when we decided to undertake some council business. That's my partner, that's her car. And since that date, there have been murmurings about the fact that she hasn't been able to claim any expenses. So, moving swiftly on. I take it if I submit a claim for expenses, you will endorse it.
Could I just remind the officer that the proceedings are being recorded?
Yes. I've said nothing out of place. That's a view of the site from the corner, showing the grassed area in the front and the hall itself. The annex will extend forward into the grassed area, and part of that proposal will be to have an outside terrace and seating area. These are the plans. One of the only issues we had with it was that originally it was proposed that the front slope of the annex roof, which would be the view you see in the top right hand of that view, was to be covered with solar panels. given it was in the conservation area, given it was in a very prominent location, and given that we're proposing to use natural slate on the roof, which was a positive thing, it was felt that the use of the solar panels there would compromise the overall design. So it was fortunate in this case that there was an alternative which we suggested to the applicant's agent, which was to put the solar panels on the forward sloping slope of the roof of the existing hall. They had to carry out some survey work to ensure that the structure was capable of carrying it. Having done so and found that it was capable of carrying it, they amended the proposal so that the solar panels are now behind the new annex, and we felt that was a very positive amendment because it allows the new building to speak for itself and show off the quality materials in terms of the natural slate, the elements of natural stone, and the large simple glazed windows. That's just a layout. I think the important one to look at is the one on the right there. It shows the existing hall, the roof plan, and the annex to the front. Again, apologies that this is a bit faint, but this is just the way it comes up when we add it into the presentation. So I think this is pretty straightforward. It's a well-used village hall. The proposal will improve those facilities for the local community, so the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions.
Thank you, Billy. Councillor Geddes.
Totally supportive of it, sir, but I think in deference to the Isle community, we should pick up and kind of reassure Ronnie, this is a good news story. I've got about £800,000 out of the big lottery for this, you know, from a small rural community. But I think, to be fair, paragraph 4.14, sir, it should be pointed out or borne in mind that, you know, the council wanted to shut the toilet block that Billy's already alluded to, and the community took it over and they've run it. So, as I say, if there's any diminution, you know, it's, I don't think we should be pointing fingers at anyone. Sorry?
I would have to say they run it better than the council did as well. Any questions for Billy? Billy, Councillor Ogilvie?
I have the disadvantage of living in the east of the region because there's no palm trees or sunshine where I live. In fact,
That's true. Well, move to the west, sir.
Exactly. And now we're building houses over there. I might do that.
The recommendation is to approve. Is anyone otherwise minded? Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Chairman. Then, in respect of St Ninian's Hall, Isle of Whithorn, the application has been approved, subject to conditions as detailed in the report.
Right. The next application is Minnygap School. Construction of pitched roof over existing flat roof, phase 2 at Minnygap Primary School, McGregor Drive, Minnygap, Newton Stewart. Mr Murray again. We're making full use of you today, Billy.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a proposal to put a shallow pitched roof over an existing flat roof on Minnygap Primary School. It's phase 2 of the project. Phase 1 is already complete. So in that view, you'll see on the left the flat roof section. On the right, you can see the shallow pitched roof of the completed phase 1 re-roofing works. This is a view of the flat roof section from the northeast. That's the subject of this application under phase 2. And that's a view of the completed phase 1. So it will simply replicate that shallow pitched roof over the existing flat roof. I would apologise in advance for the quality of the plans that are to follow, but I think in this case we're fortunate that you can actually see what's proposed by virtue of the completed phase 1. I'm afraid these are very worse than useless in this case, so apologies for that. The only issue here, which particularly arose under phase 1, was very rare bat species. That has been properly addressed. SNH are satisfied with the mitigation that's been undertaken under phase 1. It doesn't apply to the same extent to this application because the section of the building now being re-roofed was not a roost for bats, and no evidence of bats was found. However, adopting the precautionary approach on the basis of SNH advice, there is a condition recommended to ensure that work should only be carried out in the months of November to March. So the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions.
Could I ask you a question, Billy? Was the time it took for the last phase, for phase one to be completed? Was that due to bats or was it due to other factors?
I'm afraid I couldn't answer that question, Chair. I'm not party to that knowledge.
Well, that's what I'm getting round to. Is there any... somebody over there wanted... Davy,
Sorry, Chair. You're doing all this work. What about solar panels? Is there solar panels there, or do you intend to put them on, or is there no intention to put them on? Given the amount of solar panels we fitted in the last year or so, why are you, Ken, when you're doing that work, why are you not doing that too? Or is it no worth it?
I'm afraid I'm only a planning officer in this context, so that question would need to be directed to others. We can only deal with the proposal as it's put in front of us.
Councillor Drive.
Again, that's a technical question. I would be straying into the areas of speculation if I answered that.
A man with your joiner experience. David.
The only thing I could suggest is I could have a word with Chris Wood-G, who actually deals with these things, because I know Chris is actively going around looking for any opportunities at the moment. So it's maybe a case of joining up the two parts here.
Councillor Ogu.
Just to share an experience, St Columba's in Annandale went down a similar route, and what they found was that the structure couldn't cope with the weight of the roof, so that it ended up quite an expensive. I know it's not to do with this, but if you're going to talk to someone, just flag up lessons learned. I mean, we've ended up with a nice wee school in Annandale, St Columba's, but it had a flat roof, and they wanted to put that tin thing, but the weight of it was compromised because it was just a wooden structure. So that looks similar. Just a learning experience from me to you.
Thank you for that. Any further questions for... Are we agreed? Okay, Carol.
Thank you, Chairman. Then, in respect to the planning application for Minnygap Primary School, application has been approved, subject to conditions detailed in the report, and there will be some joining up between officers in respect of possibility of solar panels.
Thank you. Item 13, use of land to form a household waste recycling and material recovery centre, including erection of waste transfer building, erection of refuse and workshop building, installation of weighbridge, siting of office porta-cabin, formation of hard standing, siting of waste skips, erection of 2.4 metre high perimeter fence, landscaping works, amended proposals, in brackets, at Black Parks Industrial Estate, Stranraer. Mr Barker's not here, so your good self.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to present the slides in Peter's absence. Firstly, if members get a sense of déjà vu as we go through the slides, it's because in November last year, as many of you will recall, there was a similar proposal put forward. This is an amended proposal. It does include 2 additional buildings and a slightly amended arrangement from the previous application, but the function of it is essentially the same. Your first slide, this is a view of Fountain Way. It's looking northwards. The application site is on your right-hand side. As you can see, there's some scrub vegetation there, but the road and the pavement are fully formed. This is a view going further north along Fountain Way. It's looking towards the southeast, straight into the application site. You can obviously see the bellmouth there, which would act as the access to the site. Third shot, again, moving further along Fountain Way, that's looking south into the application site, just to generally show the levels, land cover at the moment. And at the furthest point along, this is looking pretty much due south. If you look at the location plan on page 145, this is looking south, showing the eastern edge of the application site on the right-hand side, and that's the access down to an existing business. Final photograph is a view from the end of the bellmouth, which would act as the access, and that's on the western part of the application site. Looking at the slides, you've got a layout plan here. Again, as I've mentioned, it's an amendment to the previous one. You've got 4 shed-type buildings, for want of a better description. And looking at these in the plan left to right, you've got the reuse shop workshop, then the final product building, a reception, screening, shredding and refinement building, and then in the extreme right-hand side, a waste recycling, recyclate, storage and transfer station building. In addition, you've got the vehicle circulation area, which you can see on the northern application site boundary, with a series of skips, a weighbridge and a site office, much smaller features just to the right of that, and compost bins towards the southern end of the site, just behind that building. These are plan and elevations of the proposed recyclate storage transfer station. It would be clad in coated steel, box profile cladding in a grey colour. This is showing the reuse shop, workshop, again a similar style of building and with similar finishes. And these, although they don't show very clearly at this kind of distance, it's a series of sections through the application site, so showing existing and proposed levels. As per the previous application, although this has been amended, we view it as equally satisfactory and the recommendation is therefore for approval, subject to the conditions listed.
Councillor Dryburgh.
At least Billy got out his car to take the photographs like that. Just a quick question here. There's an amendment to this one. I remember the photographs for last year as well. I'm hoping that this application is going to take into consideration the change in the environmental legislation, and that's why it's come forward. I don't know if it's a too technical question for you, or just because you're a planning officer.
I'm assuming that's the case, yes.
It was a maybe anyway. I don't know about the positive bit. Any other questions for the officer? No. Happy to. That's because it's in the west, Ronnie. It's in the west. You get the first of the good weather, but you get the first of the bad stuff as well. Are we agreed? Thank you, Carol.
Thank you then, Chairman. In respect of Blackparts Industrial Estate, Stranraer, application approved, subject to conditions as detailed in the report.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you all for your attendance. Sorry about the late lunch, but I'm sure the Chair of DG First will take it up with the appropriate officer. Councillor Gilroy.
Can I just ask, would it be possible when we get the slides up for the planning officers to have a remote pointer? Just because I found it particularly with the wind turbine one, first of all, it would have been quite useful to have known exactly what we were meant to be looking at, where we were meant to be looking when you get those.
You mean a pointer, Patsy?
Yes.
Right.
I don't know whether it's possible. You've had them sometimes. Where is it?
Way up the wall.
Yeah, there is one, but it really doesn't show very well.
I can't see it. Well, it doesn't matter. It's quite useful. I just feel it's not very, and I'm sure the general public sitting there haven't a clue what's going on.